Evan Brooks ran toward the elevator, his heart fracturing with every step. Not because he'd failed another interview, but because somewhere across the city, his 8-year-old daughter lay in an emergency room, alone and terrified. Behind him, he heard footsteps. The interviewer was chasing him down the corporate hallway, and in that moment, he didn't know if she was running to stop him or to save him. If you want to see how one father's worst day became his greatest blessing, stay with me until the very end of this story. And please, hit that like button and comment with your city name so I can see how far this message of hope travels across the world. The morning started the way desperate mornings always do, with silence that feels too heavy and light that comes too early. Evan Brooks stood in front of the bathroom mirror at 5:47 a.m., razor in hand, studying a face that had aged a decade in just 3 years. The fluorescent bulb flickered overhead, casting shadows that made the bags under his eyes look even darker. He'd bought the cheapest razors at the dollar store, the kind that pulled at your skin and left you looking worse than when you started, but they were all he could afford. Every penny counted now, every single one. He dragged the blade across his jaw, wincing as it caught on a patch of stubble. A tiny nick appeared, a bright dot of red against pale skin. He watched it bloom for a moment before tearing off a piece of toilet paper and pressing it against the cut. His hands were shaking. They'd been shaking for weeks now, ever since the eviction notice had been taped to their apartment door. 3 weeks. That's all he had. 3 weeks to find a job, to gather first and last month's rent for a new place, to somehow pull together the threads of a life that had been unraveling since the day Sarah died. "Daddy?" The voice came from just outside the bathroom door, small and sleep-soft. Evan's chest tightened. He'd hoped to get ready without waking her. "Yeah, sweetheart? Are you okay? I heard the water running." He looked at his reflection one more time. Tired eyes, cheap suit that didn't fit quite right anymore. A piece of toilet paper stuck to his face like a white flag of surrender. Then he opened the door. Lily stood in the hallway in her oversized pajamas, the ones with the cartoon rabbits that used to be her mother's favorite. She was clutching Mr. Whiskers, the stuffed cat that had been with her since she was 3, its fur matted and one ear hanging by a thread. At 8 years old, she was too old for stuffed animals, really, but Evan would never tell her that. Mr. Whiskers was one of the few constants left in her world. "I'm fine, baby. Just getting ready for my big interview today, remember?" Her face lit up, and it broke his heart how much hope lived in those eyes. Eyes that looked so much like Sarah's that sometimes he had to look away. "The one at the big building downtown? With the fancy name?" "Whitmore Solutions, yeah." He knelt down to her level, smoothing back the wild tangle of her hair. "What are you doing up so early? It's not even 6 yet." She bit her lip, a gesture she'd picked up from him. "I wanted to make sure you looked good. Mommy always said first impressions matter." The mention of Sarah hung in the air between them like a ghost. It had been 3 years since the car accident, 3 years since their world had shattered into a million pieces that Evan was still trying to fit back together. Some days it felt like the pieces didn't even belong to the same puzzle anymore. "She was right about that," Evan said softly. He reached up and pulled the toilet paper off his face, revealing the small cut underneath. "How do I look?" Lily studied him with the serious expression she wore when she was thinking hard about something. Then she reached up and straightened his tie, her small fingers fumbling with the knot. "You look like the best daddy in the world," she said. "They'd be crazy not to hire you." Evan pulled her into a hug, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill. She believed in him so completely, so absolutely. She believed this interview would change everything, that they'd get to stay in their apartment, that life would finally start getting easier. She believed because she was 8 years old and still thought the world was fair. Evan knew better. He'd been to 17 interviews in the past 4 months. 17 times he'd walked into corporate offices and conference rooms, wearing the same ill-fitting suit, carrying the same resume that told a story full of gaps and explanations. 17 times he'd watched the interviewers' faces change as they asked about his work history, as they probed into the 3-year hole where his career should have been. "Tell me about this gap in your employment. So you were a stay-at-home parent? That's nice. We're really looking for someone with more recent experience in the field. We'll be in touch." They never were. Lily, I need you to do something for me today, Evan said, pulling back from the hug but keeping his hands on her shoulders. Mrs. Chen is going to pick you up from school, okay? I might be a little late getting home. It was a lie. He'd be home at his usual time, probably earlier after another rejection, but he couldn't let her see that possibility yet. Couldn't let the hope die in her eyes before it absolutely had to. Because you'll be celebrating? Lily asked, bouncing on her toes. Because you got the job? Maybe, Evan said. The word tasted like ash in his mouth. Maybe. 2 hours later, Evan stood in front of the Whitmore Solutions building, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that seemed to pierce the clouds themselves. The morning sun reflected off its surface in blinding sheets of light, making it look less like an office building and more like a monument to everything Evan wasn't: successful, polished, secure. He checked his watch. 8:47 a.m. 13 minutes until his interview. He'd arrived early, catching the 6:15 bus and then walking the last 8 blocks because he couldn't afford the parking and the bus fare didn't go all the way downtown. His feet ached in his dress shoes, the ones he'd resold twice already because new ones weren't in the budget. Through the glass doors, he could see the lobby. Marble floors, modern art installations, people in expensive suits moving with the kind of confidence that came from never having to check your bank balance before buying groceries. This was a different world from the one Evan inhabited, a world of expense accounts and company cars and salaries that didn't require calculations on the backs of envelopes. He thought about turning around, just walking away before he could add rejection number 18 to his collection. At least then he could go home and tell Lily the interview had gone well, buy himself another few days of being her hero instead of her failure. But the eviction notice was pinned to their refrigerator under a magnet shaped like a sunflower, Sarah's favorite. 3 weeks. He didn't have the luxury of protecting his pride anymore. Evan straightened his tie, took a deep breath, and walked through the doors. The lobby was even more intimidating up close. His shoes squeaked on the polished marble floor, the sound echoing embarrassingly in the vast space. A security guard glanced up from his desk, and Evan felt immediately out of place, like someone had accidentally let the wrong person into an exclusive club. "Can I help you?" The guard's tone was polite but assessing, eyes tracking from Evan's scuffed shoes to his outdated tie. "I have an interview, 9 o'clock, with..." Evan pulled the email confirmation from his briefcase, a worn leather thing that had been Sarah's college graduation gift to him a lifetime ago. "With Ms. Clara Whitmore." The guard's eyebrows rose slightly. "Clara Whitmore? The CEO?" Evan's stomach dropped. Yes?" The email said Clara Whitmore, senior executive. "She's the CEO," the guard repeated, but he was already picking up the phone, speaking in low tones. When he hung up, his expression had shifted to something almost like respect. 34th floor, elevator bank on your right. They're expecting you." The elevator ride felt like being shot upward through the atmosphere. Evan watched the floor numbers climb, 10, 15, 20, each one taking him further from solid ground. His reflection in the polished doors showed a man trying to look like he belonged, and failing. He adjusted his tie for the 100th time. The 34th floor was all floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist furniture, the kind of space that cost more per square foot than Evan paid for his entire apartment each month. A receptionist with perfect hair and a practiced smile directed him to a waiting area. "Ms. Whitmore is finishing up a call. She'll be with you shortly. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water?" "Water would be great, thank you." She returned with a bottle of sparkling water in a glass that probably cost more than his watch. Evan sat on a chair that was somehow both beautiful and uncomfortable, holding his briefcase on his lap like a shield, watching successful people walk past with the kind of purpose he used to have. This was it, his last real chance. He'd applied to 43 positions in the past 4 months, gotten 17 interviews, and received 17 general rejections. The job market had moved on without him during those 3 years he'd spent being a full-time father. His skills had atrophied. His network had evaporated. His confidence had crumbled. But this position, Senior Operations Coordinator, was perfect. It was exactly what he'd done before Sarah died, before everything fell apart, before he'd made the choice to step away from his career to raise Lily himself, to be both mother and father to a 5-year-old who'd just lost her whole world. No one had told him that choice would make him essentially unemployable 3 years later. "Mr. Brooks?" Evan looked up. A woman stood before him, mid-40s, with steel-gray hair pulled back in a neat bun and eyes that seemed to catalog everything about him in a single glance. She wore a navy suit that fit perfectly, the kind of professional armor that announced competence and control. This was Clara Whitmore. "Yes, that's me." Evan stood quickly, nearly knocking over the water glass. He caught it just in time, then extended his hand, hoping she wouldn't notice how sweaty his palm was. "Thank you for seeing me." Her handshake was firm, brief, professional. "Follow me." She led him down a corridor lined with awards and framed articles. Whitmore Solutions recognized for innovation, for growth, for excellence. Every step felt like a reminder of how far Evan had fallen from the professional world. Her office was a corner suite with views that stretched across the entire city. Evan could see his neighborhood from here, a cluster of aging apartment buildings near the industrial district. He could probably see his building if he knew which direction to look. "Please, sit." Clara gestured to a chair across from her desk, which was organized with the precision of someone who controlled every aspect of their environment. No family photos, Evan noticed. No personal touches, just efficiency. She settled into her own chair and opened a folder. His application materials, he realized. His resume with all its gaps and explanations laid bare. "So, Evan, may I call you Evan?" "Of course." "I've reviewed your application, and I have to say, your experience before 2019 is impressive. Senior coordinator at Brightwell Industries, project management certifications, consistently strong performance reviews." She looked up at him, her expression unreadable. "You were on track for management." "Yes, ma'am." "And then you left." "Completely. For 3 years." She tapped the resume with one perfectly manicured finger. "That's quite a departure from a promising career." Here it was. The question he'd been asked 17 times before. The question he'd answered 17 different ways, trying to find the magic combination of words that would make someone understand without making them see him as a liability. "My wife passed away," Evan said, keeping his voice steady. He'd learned not to let emotion creep in during this part. Emotion made people uncomfortable. "We had a 5-year-old daughter. I made the decision to step back from my career to focus on raising her." Clara's expression didn't change. No sympathy, no judgment, just that same assessing gaze. "I see. And now you're ready to return to work?" "Yes." Evan leaned forward slightly, trying to project confidence he didn't entirely feel. "I've kept up with industry developments, maintained my certifications, and I believe my experience managing a household, budgets, schedules, problem-solving under pressure, has actually enhanced my organizational skills." It was the pitch he'd perfected over 17 interviews, the one that tried to spin 3 years of grief and survival into professional development. Clara made a note in the folder. "Tell me about a time you had to manage multiple competing priorities with limited resources." And so it began. The interview fell into a familiar rhythm: behavioral questions, hypothetical scenarios, discussions of his past projects and future goals. Evan had done this enough times to know how to answer, how to smile at the right moments, how to demonstrate enthusiasm without seeming desperate, even though desperation was sitting like a stone in his chest. Clara Whitmore was a skilled interviewer. She didn't give anything away, didn't offer encouraging nods or positive feedback. She simply listened, made notes, and moved on to the next question with mechanical precision. "What interests you about this position specifically?" The honest answer? "I need it. I need it because my daughter and I are about to be evicted. I need it because my bank account has $47 in it and rent is due in a week. I need it because I've been surviving on hope and food bank donations and the charity of neighbors who can't really afford to be charitable themselves." The interview answer? Whitmore Solutions has a reputation for innovation and employee development. This position would allow me to contribute my organizational expertise while growing with a company that values progress and excellence. It sounded good, professional, exactly what an interviewer wanted to hear. Clara made another note. "And how do you think you'd handle the transition back to corporate culture after being away for so long?" "I'm a fast learner," Evan said. And I'm highly motivated. I understand that there may be a learning curve, but I'm committed to... His phone buzzed in his pocket. Evan's heart stopped. He'd silenced it. He was certain he'd silenced it. He'd checked 3 times before walking into the building. But there it was, vibrating insistently against his leg. "I'm so sorry," he said quickly, reaching to turn it off completely. "I thought I'd..." But as he pulled the phone out, he saw the screen. Mrs. Chen. Calling, not texting. Mrs. Chen, who was watching Lily at school, who never called during the day unless... The phone buzzed again. A text-this message flashed across the screen, and Evan's entire world tilted on its axis. Emergency. Lily fell at school. Ambulance taking her to St. Mary's. I'm following. Come now. The words blurred. Evan read them again, trying to make them mean something different, something less catastrophic. Ambulance, emergency, his daughter, his 8-year-old daughter who'd straightened his tie this morning and told him he looked like the best daddy in the world. "Mr. Brooks?" Clara's voice came from somewhere far away. "Is everything all right?" Evan stood up. The room swayed slightly, or maybe he did. His hands were shaking so badly he nearly dropped the phone. "I have to go." The words came out strangled. "My daughter, there's been an accident. I'm sorry, I have to..." He was already moving toward the door, professional courtesy abandoning him as raw panic took over. His briefcase, where was his briefcase? He'd set it down beside the chair. He grabbed it, nearly knocking over a small sculpture on Clara's desk. "Mr. Brooks, wait." "I'm sorry," Evan said again, and he was. Sorry for wasting her time, sorry for being unprofessional, sorry for being a single father whose life could implode at any moment. "I have to go to her." He was out the door before Clara could respond, half running down the pristine corridor toward the elevator bank. His vision had narrowed to a tunnel. All he could see was that message. Ambulance, emergency, St. Mary's Hospital. The elevator seemed to take hours to arrive. Evan stabbed the button repeatedly, a useless gesture that did nothing except give his panic something to focus on. When the doors finally opened, he threw himself inside and hit the lobby button so hard it hurt his finger. As the elevator descended, Evan pulled up Mrs. Chen's number with shaking hands. She answered on the first ring. "Evan, thank goodness. Are you coming?" "What happened? Is she okay? Mrs. Chen, what happened?" "She was on the playground playing tag with some other kids. She fell. I don't know exactly how. It happened so fast. She hit her head on the equipment, and Evan, there was so much blood. The school nurse called an ambulance immediately. I'm in my car following them now." Blood. Head injury. Ambulance. Each word was a hammer blow. "I'm on my way. I'm coming right now. Tell her..." His voice broke. "Tell her daddy's coming." "I will, honey. Drive safe, okay? She needs you to get there safely." The elevator reached the lobby and Evan burst out, running across the marble floor. The security guard called out something, but Evan didn't stop. Out the glass doors, down the steps, onto the sidewalk where the morning crowd of professionals parted around him like water around a stone. St. Mary's Hospital, 7 miles across the city. He didn't have a car, couldn't afford one, couldn't afford the insurance or the gas or the maintenance. He'd been taking buses and walking everywhere for 3 years. But his daughter was in an ambulance, bleeding, hurt, possibly... No. He wouldn't think that. Couldn't think that. Evan raised his hand for a taxi. One passed, occupied, then another. His chest was tight, breath coming in short gasps. This couldn't be happening. Not Lily. Not his little girl who still slept with Mr. Whiskers, who believed her daddy could fix anything, who'd already lost her mother and couldn't lose anything else. A third taxi slowed, and Evan lunged for the door. "St. Mary's Hospital," he gasped as he fell into the back seat. "Emergency room, please hurry." The driver, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, must have seen something in Evan's face because he didn't ask questions. He just nodded and pulled into traffic with more speed than the morning rush hour usually allowed. Evan stared at his phone, willing it to ring again with better news. An update. A mistake. Something to tell him this was all a misunderstanding and Lily was fine and... His phone buzzed. But it wasn't Mrs. Chen. It was an email notification from Whitmore Solutions. Evan almost deleted it without reading. What did it matter now? The interview was over. He'd walked out, abandoned any chance he'd had at that job. Just like he'd abandoned 17 others, in a way. Always the same story, the gap in his resume, the single father, the man who'd chosen his daughter over his career and was still paying the price. But something made him open the email. Maybe it was the part of his brain that was desperately seeking distraction from the panic. Maybe it was morbid curiosity about how quickly they could send a rejection. Dear Mr. Brooks, thank you for taking the time to interview with us this morning. While we appreciate your interest in Whitmore Solutions, we have decided to move forward with other candidates whose experience more closely aligns with our current needs. We wish you the best in your job search. Sincerely, Clara Whitmore, CEO, Whitmore Solutions. The email was time-stamped 8 minutes ago. She'd sent it while he was still in the elevator, probably, before he'd even made it out of the building. Evan laughed, a short, bitter sound that made the taxi driver glance in the rearview mirror with concern. Of course she'd rejected him that quickly. He'd walked out of an interview with the CEO. What else could he have expected? 18 interviews, 18 rejections. And now his daughter was hurt, possibly seriously, and he had no job, no money, no way to pay for whatever medical bills were waiting for him at St. Mary's. The eviction notice was still on his refrigerator. The electricity bill was 3 weeks overdue. The last of the food bank donations were running out. Everything was falling apart, and Evan had no idea how to hold the pieces together anymore. Sir, we're here. Evan looked up. St. Mary's Hospital loomed before him, a sprawling complex of buildings that represented both hope and financial ruin. Emergency room ambulances were parked outside the entrance, and Evan's heart lurched, thinking one of them might have carried his daughter. How much? He asked, reaching for his wallet. $14.50. Evan had $23 in cash. That left $8.50 for everything else he might need today. But none of that mattered right now. He thrust a 20 at the driver. Keep the change. Then he was running again, through the automatic doors into the chaos of the emergency room. The smell hit him first, antiseptic, and fear, and the peculiar scent of a place where life and death played out in adjoining rooms. A security guard tried to stop him, asking if he was okay, but Evan pushed past. My daughter, he gasped to the woman at the reception desk. Lily Brooks. She came in an ambulance. I'm her father. Where is she? The receptionist's fingers flew over her keyboard, and every second felt like an hour. Finally, she looked up. Bay 7. Through those doors, take a left. But sir, you'll need to check in first. Fill out some... Evan was already moving. Through the doors, left down a corridor lined with curtained bays where other people's emergencies played out in muffled tones. Bay 7. He could hear Mrs. Chen's voice before he saw her, speaking in soothing tones. He pushed aside the curtain, and there was Lily. She was lying on a gurney that made her look impossibly small, her face pale except for the gauze taped to her forehead, already spotted with red. Her eyes were closed. Mrs. Chen sat beside her, holding her hand, and a nurse stood on the other side checking vital signs on a monitor. Lily! Evan rushed to the gurney, his hands hovering over his daughter, afraid to touch her, afraid he might hurt her more. Baby, I'm here, Daddy's here. Her eyes fluttered open, and when she saw him, her face crumpled. Daddy, she whimpered, and the sound broke something in Evan's chest. It hurts. I know, sweetheart. I know. He took her hand, the one without the IV, and held it gently. But you're going to be okay. The doctors are going to take care of you. Sir? The nurse spoke up, professional but not unkind. Are you the father? Yes, Evan Brooks. What happened? How bad is it? She has a head laceration that required 12 stitches. We've done a CT scan to rule out any internal bleeding or skull fracture. The doctor will be in shortly to discuss the results. She's been very brave. 12 stitches, CT scan. The words swirled around Evan's head like debris in a storm. This was real. This was happening. Thank you, he managed to say. Then to Mrs. Chen, thank you for calling me, for being here with her. The older woman patted his arm. Of course, dear. I would never leave her alone, but you're here now, so I'll step out and give you some privacy. I'll be right in the waiting room if you need anything. After she left, Evan pulled a chair close to the gurney and sat down, still holding Lily's hand. She looked so small under the hospital blanket, so fragile. The gauze on her forehead was already seeping through, and Evan couldn't stop staring at it. "Did you get the job?" Lily asked suddenly, her voice small. Evan's throat tightened. "Don't worry about that right now, baby. Let's just focus on getting you better." "But did you?" She was looking at him with those eyes, Sarah's eyes, still believing in him even now. Did they say yes? He couldn't lie to her, not while she was lying in a hospital bed with stitches in her head, but he couldn't tell her the truth either, couldn't add his failure to her pain. "The interview got cut short because I had to come be with you," he said carefully, "which is exactly where I should be." A tear slid down Lily's cheek. "I'm sorry I ruined it." "Hey!" Evan leaned closer, wiping the tear away with his thumb. "You didn't ruin anything. Nothing is more important than you. Nothing. Do you understand me?" She nodded, but more tears came, and Evan realized she was crying not from pain but from guilt. His 8-year-old daughter was lying in an emergency room feeling guilty for needing her father. "Listen to me," Evan said, his voice fierce with love. "You are my whole world. Jobs come and go. Money comes and goes. But you're forever. You're everything. I would walk out of 1,000 interviews to be here with you. Even though we need the money." Her voice was so small. Evan's heart shattered. She knew. Of course she knew. Children always knew more than you wanted them to, felt more than you tried to protect them from. She'd seen the eviction notice. She'd felt the weight of their situation, even though he'd tried so hard to shield her. "Even though?" he confirmed. "Every single time." Before Lily could respond, the curtain parted and a doctor walked in. Young, probably early 30s, with tired eyes that suggested a long shift. "Mr. Brooks, I'm Dr. Patterson. I have Lily's scan results." Evan stood up, his hand still holding his daughter's. "And?" "The good news is there's no fracture, no internal bleeding, no signs of concussion. The fall was scary and the laceration was significant, but she's going to be fine. Kids are resilient." The doctor smiled at Lily. "You're a tough one, aren't you?" The relief was so intense it made Evan dizzy. He had to grip the rail of the gurney to steady himself. "So she can go home?" "Not quite yet. We want to monitor her for a few more hours, make sure there are no delayed symptoms. But yes, barring any complications, you should be able to take her home this evening." The doctor paused, his expression becoming more serious. "Mr. Brooks, there's also the matter of the paperwork. We'll need your insurance information and—" "I don't have insurance." The words came out flat, defeated. "I lost my job 3 years ago and couldn't afford to maintain the coverage. I've been meaning to get onto a government plan, but the paperwork, the requirements—" He trailed off, the excuses sounding hollow even to himself. The doctor's expression softened with something that might have been pity, and Evan hated it. "I understand. The billing department can discuss payment plans with you. For now, let's just focus on getting your daughter through observation." After the doctor left, Evan sat back down, his mind racing. No insurance, a hospital visit with stitches and a CT scan. He had no idea what that would cost, but it would be in the thousands. Thousands he didn't have. His phone buzzed again. Another email, probably from one of the 30 other jobs he'd applied to, another automated rejection. He was about to ignore it when he saw the sender. Clara Whitmore. Evan's finger hovered over the delete button. What could she possibly want? To rub salt in the wound? To make sure he understood just how thoroughly he'd failed? But curiosity, or maybe masochism, made him open it. "Mr. Brooks, I believe you left your briefcase in my office. I have it secured here. Additionally, I wanted to follow up on our earlier conversation. When you're able, please contact my office to arrange a time to retrieve your belongings. CW." Evan stared at the email, his briefcase. In all the panic and fear, he'd completely forgotten about it. Sarah's college graduation gift to him, the leather worn soft with age and use, containing his resume, his certifications, the notes he'd made about Whitmore Solutions, and the photograph. The only photograph he carried with him, Sarah and Lily, taken 4 years ago at the beach, both of them laughing, Lily's ice cream melting down her hand. The last picture of all three of them happy together. Fresh panic bloomed in Evan's chest. He had to get that briefcase back. The certifications could be replaced, the resume reprinted, but that photograph... Daddy? Lily's voice was drowsy. They'd given her something for the pain. What's wrong? Nothing, baby. Evan put his phone away and took her hand again. I just need to pick something up later, but I'm not going anywhere right now. I'm staying right here with you. She smiled, a sleepy, trusting smile. Promise? Promise. And as Lily drifted off, her hand still in his, Evan sat in that uncomfortable hospital chair and felt the full weight of his failure settle over him. No job. Medical bills he couldn't pay. An eviction notice waiting at home. His most precious possession forgotten in the office of a woman who'd rejected him before he'd even made it out of the building. He'd told Lily he would walk out of 1,000 interviews to be with her, and he'd meant it. But the truth was simpler and more devastating than that. He didn't have to walk out of 1,000 interviews. He just had to fail them. And he was failing. At providing, at protecting, at being the father she believed he was. Every day he woke up trying to hold their world together, and every day it slipped a little further through his fingers. Evan looked down at his daughter, sleeping peacefully now despite the stitches in her forehead. She still believed in him, still thought he looked like the best daddy in the world. He just hoped that when everything finally fell apart, and it would fall apart, he could feel the collapse coming like a building that had lost its foundation. He hoped that she would understand that he'd tried so hard. Outside the hospital bay, the world continued on. People came and went with their emergencies. Doctors saved lives. Nurses brought comfort. The machinery of medicine turned with practiced efficiency. And Evan sat in a plastic chair holding his daughter's hand, watching the seconds tick by on the wall clock, each one bringing them closer to a future he couldn't see and couldn't afford and couldn't escape. His phone sat silent in his pocket. No job offers forthcoming, no miracle solutions arriving to save the day. Just a single father and his little girl, together in an emergency room, holding on to each other like they'd been doing for 3 years. Because in the end, that was all they had, each other. And maybe, despite everything, that would have to be enough. The hours in the hospital crawled by with the peculiar slowness of time measured in beeping monitors and hushed conversations. Evan never left Lily's side, watching her sleep, counting her breaths, his hand wrapped protectively around hers. Every 15 minutes, a nurse came by to check her vitals, to ask questions about her alertness and pain level, and each time Evan felt his chest tighten with fresh worry. "She's doing great, Mr. Brooks," the third nurse told him around 3 in the afternoon. "Her numbers are stable. Doctor should be by soon to clear her for discharge." "Thank you," Evan said, though the word felt inadequate for the relief flooding through him. Mrs. Chen had left around noon, promising to bring Lily's favorite stuffed animal from home and insisting on picking up something for Evan to eat. He'd protested, but she'd waved him off with the kind of maternal firmness that didn't allow for argument. She returned an hour later with Mr. Guatmachishursumbashkit, whiskers under one arm and a paper bag from the deli down the street from their apartment. "You need to eat," she said, pressing the bag into his hands. "You're no good to her if you pass out from hunger." The sandwich sat mostly untouched beside him now, his appetite drowned out by anxiety. But he'd forced down half of it because Mrs. Chen was right. He needed to stay strong for Lily. Around 4 o'clock, Lily woke up fully, the medication wearing off enough for her to be more alert. The gauze on her forehead had been changed twice, the stitches underneath hidden but present. She'd have a scar, Dr. Patterson had told them. Not a large one, probably, but visible. "Does it hurt?" Evan asked, brushing her hair back gently from the bandage. "A little," Lily admitted. "It feels weird, like it's pulling." "That's the stitches. They'll come out in about a week, and then it'll feel better." She touched the gauze carefully, exploratory fingers trying to understand what had happened to her head. "Will I look different?" The question hit Evan harder than it should have. She was 8 years old and already worried about scars, about being marked by trauma. He thought of Sarah, of how she'd carried invisible scars from her own childhood that had shaped the kind of mother she'd been, protective, fierce, determined that Lily would grow up feeling safe and loved. "You'll look like someone who's brave," Evan said firmly. Someone who fell down and got back up. That's not different, baby. That's just you becoming who you're supposed to be. Lily considered this, her small face serious. Mommy had a scar on her knee from when she fell off her bike when she was little. Evan smiled, the memory surfacing despite the pain that always came with thoughts of Sarah. She did. She told you that story? Yeah. She said scars are just proof that we keep going even when things are hard. The wisdom of it, coming from his 8-year-old daughter, made Evan's throat tight. Sarah was still here, he realized, still teaching their daughter how to be strong, still shaping who she was becoming, even 3 years gone. Your mom was right about that, Evan said quietly. Dr. Patterson arrived around 4:30, reviewing Lily's charts with the focused attention of someone who took his responsibility seriously. He asked Lily questions. Did she feel dizzy? Did her head hurt? Could she tell him what day it was? And seemed satisfied with her answers. Everything looks good, he announced. I'm comfortable releasing her into your care, Mr. Brooks. Standard concussion protocol. Wake her every few hours tonight to make sure she's responsive. Watch for any vomiting, confusion, or severe headache. If any of those occur, bring her back immediately. Otherwise, she should be able to return to school in a few days. No rough play for at least 2 weeks. I understand, Evan said. Thank you, doctor. After Patterson left, a woman in business casual appeared, clipboard in hand and expression carefully neutral. Evan's stomach sank. The billing department. Mr. Brooks, I'm Jennifer from Patient Accounts. I need to go over some financial information with you regarding today's visit. Of course. Evan stood up, glancing at Lily, who was now absorbed in coloring on the activity sheet a nurse had brought her. Can we step outside? They moved just beyond the curtain, far enough that Lily wouldn't hear, but close enough that Evan could still see her through the gap in the fabric. Jennifer pulled out several forms. The total for today's emergency room visit, including the CT scan, physician consultations, and treatment, comes to $8,347. Without insurance, that's your responsibility. We do offer payment plans if you're unable to pay the full amount today. $8,000. The number hung in the air between them like a sentence. Evan had $47 in his bank account and $850 in his pocket. His rent was $1,200 a month, already overdue. He had bills stacked on his kitchen counter in order of urgency, none of them paid. What kind of payment plans? His voice came out steady somehow, even though his insides were churning. We typically ask for a minimum of 10% down, then monthly payments of at least $200. We can work with you on the timeline, but we do require some initial payment today. 10% would be over $800. Money he absolutely did not have. Monthly payments of $200 on top of rent and utilities and food and everything else Lily needed, it was impossible. The math didn't work. The math hadn't worked for 3 years, and every month he juggled bills and borrowed from Mrs. Chen and stretched every dollar until it screamed. But this was different. This was insurmountable. I need to be honest with you, Evan said quietly. I don't have the money for a down payment. I don't even have the money for the first monthly payment. I'm a single father. I've been unemployed for several months and we're about to be evicted from our apartment. I'm not trying to avoid responsibility. I want to pay for my daughter's care, but I literally don't have the resources right now. Jennifer's expression softened slightly, the professional mask cracking to show the human underneath. I understand. That's a difficult situation. Let me see what I can do. She made notes on her forms. We have a financial hardship program. I can start the application process for you, but it requires documentation, tax returns, proof of income or lack thereof, bank statements. Do you have access to those documents? Yes, I can get them to you. Good. In the meantime, I'll put a hold on the account. That means collections won't start for 90 days while we process your application. If you qualify, we may be able to reduce the amount owed or set up a more manageable payment structure. But Mr. Brooks, I need you to understand this is temporary relief. Eventually, this bill will need to be addressed. I understand. Thank you. After Jennifer left with her clipboard and her sympathetic eyes, Evan stood in the hallway for a moment, trying to pull himself together. $8,000, on top of everything else. The eviction notice gave him 3 weeks. Even if he got a job tomorrow, which he wouldn't because he'd just walked out of his 18th interview and received his 18th rejection, Even if he somehow found employment immediately, it would be weeks before his first paycheck. Too late to stop the eviction. Too late to catch up on the bills. Too late to prevent the complete collapse of their life. He was drowning, and he'd just been handed an anchor. When he returned to the bay, Lily looked up from her coloring with a bright smile that pierced his heart. She had no idea. No idea how dire their situation was, how close they were to losing everything. She just knew her daddy was here, and that made everything okay. "Can we go home soon?" she asked. "Soon, baby. They're just finishing up some paperwork." The discharge process took another hour. More forms, more instructions, a prescription for pain medication that Evan would have to figure out how to afford. The pharmacy at the hospital wanted $73 for a week's supply. Evan asked if there was a generic version, anything cheaper, and eventually walked away with a smaller bottle and a $50 charge he put on a credit card that was already maxed out. By the time they left the hospital, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed too beautiful for a day that had been so catastrophic. Mrs. Chen drove them home, Lily dozing in the back seat, exhausted from pain and medication and the trauma of the day. "Thank you," Evan told her as she pulled up in front of their building, "for everything, for being there with her, for calling me, for all of it." Mrs. Chen reached over and patted his hand. "You're a good father, Evan. Don't let today make you think otherwise." But as he carried Lily up the 3 flights of stairs to their apartment, the elevator had been broken for 6 months, and the landlord showed no interest in fixing it. Evan felt anything but good. He felt like a man who'd failed at the only job that mattered. Their apartment was exactly as he'd left it that morning. Small, shabby, but clean. Evan had spent the previous evening scrubbing and organizing, trying to make their little space feel like a home instead of a temporary shelter from the storm. The eviction notice was still on the refrigerator under Sarah's sunflower magnet, a stark reminder that even this inadequate space wouldn't be theirs much longer. He settled Lily on the couch with Mr. Whiskers and a blanket, then went to heat up some soup from the pantry. The kitchen was sparse. He'd learned to shop carefully, buying whatever was on sale, stretching each meal as far as it would go. Rice and beans, pasta and sauce, whatever he could make in bulk and freeze for the days when there was no money at all. "Daddy?" Lily called from the living room. "Can we watch a movie?" "Sure, sweetheart. What do you want to watch?" "The one with the princess who builds the ice castle." Evan smiled despite everything. It was her favorite, had been since she was 5. She'd watched it with Sarah dozens of times, knew every song, every line. After Sarah died, Evan couldn't watch it for months. It hurt too much, reminded him too viscerally of what they'd lost. But eventually, Lily had asked for it again, and he'd realized that for her, it wasn't just a movie. It was a connection to her mother, a thread of memory she could hold on to. He queued it up on the secondhand tablet they shared, the one he'd bought from a pawn shop for $30. No cable, no streaming services, just a collection of movies downloaded when the library had free Wi-Fi, rationed out for special occasions. "Here you go, baby, but not too loud, okay? Your head needs rest." Lily nodded, already absorbed in the opening sequence. Evan brought her the soup and watched her eat slowly, carefully, wincing slightly when she moved her head too quickly. The bandage on her forehead was stark white against her skin, a visible reminder of how quickly everything could change, how fragile their small life really was. His phone buzzed. Evan pulled it out, expecting another bill notification or maybe a text from Mrs. Chen checking in. Instead, it was an email from Clara Whitmore. His finger hovered over the screen. She'd already sent him 2 emails today, the rejection and the note about his briefcase. What could she possibly want now? To make sure he understood he should never apply to Whitmore Solutions again? To send him an invoice for wasting her time? Against his better judgment, Evan opened it. "Mr. Brooks, I've cleared my schedule for tomorrow morning. If you're able, please come by at 8:30 a.m. to retrieve your briefcase. Ask for me at reception. I'd also like to speak with you briefly, if you have time. Clara Whitmore." Evan read it twice, trying to parse the meaning behind the words. She wanted to speak with him, briefly. After rejecting him, after he'd walked out of the interview, after every bridge had already been thoroughly burned. Maybe she wanted to lecture him about professionalism. Or maybe she'd found something in his briefcase that needed explanation. Or maybe, and this thought made him feel pathetic even considering it, Maybe she'd reconsidered. Maybe there was still a chance. No, that was foolish. People didn't reconsider rejections, especially not rejections of candidates who'd abandoned interviews midway through. Whatever Clara Whitmore wanted to discuss, it wasn't to offer him a job. But he needed that briefcase, needed the photograph of Sarah and Lily, needed that tangible piece of the life they'd had before everything fell apart. He'd go tomorrow morning, get the briefcase, endure whatever conversation she felt was necessary, and then figure out what came next. Maybe there were other jobs to apply for. Maybe he could find something part-time, cobble together enough hours to buy them a few more weeks. Maybe, "Daddy, you're not watching." Evan looked up. Lily was pointing at the tablet screen where the princess was building her ice castle, walls rising from nothing, perfect and crystalline and impossible. "Sorry, baby. I'm watching now." He sat down beside her on the couch, and she leaned against him carefully, mindful of her stitches. On screen, the princess sang about letting go, about freedom and isolation, and becoming who you're meant to be. The lyrics felt like mockery. Let go of what? He had nothing left to let go of. And freedom? There was no freedom in poverty, no liberation in failure. But Lily sang along softly, her voice sweet and slightly off-key, and Evan put his arm around her shoulders and pretended the world wasn't collapsing around them. For these 2 hours, they could exist in a story where magic was real, and problems got solved, and love always won in the end. Reality would be waiting when the movie ended. It always was. That night, Evan set alarms for every 2 hours as Dr. Patterson had instructed. Each time his phone buzzed, he'd go to Lily's room and gently wake her, ask her the questions. "What's your name? Where are you? What day is it?" And watch her face scrunch up in sleepy confusion before she answered correctly. Then he'd let her drift back to sleep while he stayed awake, staring at the ceiling of his own room, running calculations that never came out right. $8,000 in medical bills, $1,200 in back rent, $300 in utilities, credit cards maxed out, no job, 3 weeks until eviction. The numbers circled in his head like vultures. At 2 a.m. during one of his wake-up checks, Lily grabbed his hand before he could leave her room. "Daddy, are we going to be okay?" The question froze him in place. She was supposed to be the one who still believed everything would work out. She was supposed to be sheltered from the weight of their reality. "Of course we are," Evan said, the lie coming easier in the darkness. "Why would you ask that?" "I heard you on the phone yesterday with the landlord. He was yelling." Evan's heart sank. He'd taken that call in the kitchen while Lily was supposed to be doing homework in her room. He'd thought she couldn't hear, but of course she had. Children always heard the things you didn't want them to hear. "That's grown-up stuff, sweetheart. Nothing for you to worry about." "But we have to move, right? That's what eviction means." There was no point in lying now. She already knew. "Maybe. I'm working on it. That's why I went to that interview today. I'm trying to find a job so we can stay." "But you didn't get it." Not a question, a statement. "No, but there will be other jobs, other chances." Lily was quiet for a long moment, and in the dim light from the hallway, Evan could see her struggling with something. Finally she spoke, her voice very small. "Is it because of me? Because you have to take care of me instead of working?" "No." The word came out fierce, almost angry. Evan sat on the edge of her bed and took both her hands in his. "Listen to me, Lily. None of this is because of you. None of it. Taking care of you is not a burden. It's not an obstacle. It's the best, most important thing I've ever done. Do you understand?" "But if Mommy was still here, things would be different in a lot of ways. But she's not, and that's not your fault either. Sometimes life is just hard. Sometimes things don't work out the way we plan. But that doesn't mean we stop trying. It doesn't mean we give up." "Are you going to give up?" The question hung in the air, heavy with fear and hope, and the absolute trust of a child who believed her father could do anything. Evan thought about the eviction notice, the medical bills, the rejection emails, the crushing weight of 18 failures. "No," he said, "I'm not going to give up. I promise you that." Lily nodded, seeming satisfied with this answer, and settled back into her pillows. Within minutes, she was asleep again, her breathing steady and peaceful. But Evan sat there for a while longer, watching her in the darkness, wondering how he was going to keep the promise he'd just made. Because the truth was, He didn't know if he could. Didn't know if wanting something badly enough actually made it happen. The universe didn't care about his promises to his daughter. The universe had already taken her mother. What was a little more cruelty in the grand scheme of things? At 6 a.m., Evan gave up on sleep entirely. He made coffee with the last of the grounds, standing in the kitchen as dawn broke over the city. Somewhere out there was Whitmore Solutions, Clara Whitmore, and the briefcase containing the only photograph he carried of his family, whole and happy. He had no idea what she wanted to discuss, no idea what came next, but he'd go to that meeting at 8:30 and he'd face whatever needed to be faced, because that's what fathers did. They showed up. They kept trying. They pretended to have answers even when they were just as lost as everyone else. Evan checked on Lily one more time, still sleeping peacefully, then left a note for Mrs. Chen, who had agreed to come sit with her. The same worn suit from yesterday, the same scuffed shoes, the same tired face in the mirror. But today felt different somehow. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was resignation. Or maybe it was something else entirely. The strange clarity that comes when you've lost so much that there's nothing left to protect, no dignity left to preserve. He had nothing to lose anymore. And that, in its own way, was almost freeing. The bus ride downtown retraced his route from the day before, but everything looked different in the morning light. The gleaming towers of the financial district seemed less intimidating, more indifferent. The city wasn't cruel, it just didn't care. And there was something honest in that indifference, something Evan could work with. Whitmore Solutions looked the same as it had 24 hours ago, glass and steel, and the kind of corporate perfection that suggested everything inside ran with precision and purpose. Evan walked through the lobby, past the same security guard who nodded in recognition. Back for Miss Whitmore? Yes, 8:30 appointment. Elevator to 34, she's expecting you. The ride up felt faster this time. Or maybe Evan was just less nervous. What was the worst that could happen? She'd already rejected him, already seen him at his most unprofessional. Whatever came next couldn't be more humiliating than yesterday. The receptionist greeted him with the same professional courtesy. Mr. Brooks, Ms. Whitmore asked that you wait here. She's just finishing a call. Can I get you anything? Coffee? No, thank you. Evan sat in the same uncomfortable chair, holding the same anxious tension in his chest, but this time he noticed details he'd missed before. The art on the walls wasn't just expensive, it was meaningful. Photographs of people, communities, moments of human connection. A quote etched into a glass panel. Success is measured not by what we achieve, but by what we enable others to achieve. The philosophy felt at odds with the rejection email, with the corporate efficiency that had dismissed him so quickly. But maybe that was just good PR. Maybe the quote was there to make employees feel better about the ruthless business beneath. Mr. Brooks? Evan looked up. Clara Whitmore stood before him, but she looked different today. Still professional, still put together, but something in her expression had softened. She held his briefcase in her hands. Thank you for coming. Please, follow me. She led him back to her office, but instead of sitting behind her desk in that position of power, she gestured to two chairs arranged near the window, a small table between them. A more intimate setting, a conversation, not an interview. Evan sat, and Clara placed his briefcase on the table between them. I wanted to return this personally, she said, and I owe you an apology. Of all the things Evan had expected to hear, that wasn't one of them. An apology? Yes. The email I sent yesterday, the rejection, was premature and unprofessional. I sent it in a moment of, she paused, searching for the word, reaction, not reflection. And that was wrong. Evan didn't know what to say. The rejection had stung, but he'd understood it, accepted it, moved on to mourning the next opportunity that wouldn't come. Ms. Whitmore, I walked out of the interview. You had every right to. You walked out because your daughter was hurt, because she needed you. Clara leaned forward slightly, her voice firm. Mr. Brooks, I've conducted thousands of interviews over my career. I've seen candidates who were brilliant but cruel, polished but dishonest, impressive on paper but hollow in practice. Yesterday, in the 37 minutes we spent together before you left, I saw something different. I saw someone who understood that some things matter more than opportunity. That's not a weakness. That's character. Evan felt his chest tighten. He didn't trust this, didn't understand where it was leading. I appreciate that, but how's your daughter? The question stopped him. It wasn't perfunctory. Clara asked it like she genuinely wanted to know, like the answer mattered. She's okay. 12 stitches, mild concussion, but she'll recover. Thank you for asking. I'm glad. Clara was quiet for a moment, and in that silence, Evan saw something flicker across her face. Recognition, maybe. Or memory. Mr. Brooks, can I tell you a story? Of course. 15 years ago, I was a single mother with a 6-year-old son. I'd left my marriage, left a comfortable life, because staying was worse than the uncertainty of leaving. I was working as a junior analyst at a consulting firm, barely making ends meet, trying to prove I could do the job while also being the only parent my child had. She paused, her eyes distant. One day, I had a presentation to the board. Biggest opportunity of my career, a chance to show what I was capable of. And that morning, my son got sick at school, really sick. Fever of 103, the school nurse calling me in a panic. Evan listened, seeing where this was going, feeling the parallel like an echo. I left the presentation, Clara continued, walked out halfway through my remarks, left the board sitting there, and drove to the school. My boss was furious. Told me I'd just committed career suicide, that I'd never be taken seriously again. And you know what? He was partly right. I lost that job, lost the opportunity, spent 6 months unemployed, burning through savings I didn't have, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. What happened? Evan asked quietly. Someone took a chance on me. A woman who'd been in that board meeting, who'd seen me leave. She ran a small startup, nothing glamorous, but she understood that the instinct I'd shown, putting my child first, wasn't a liability. It was proof that I understood priorities, that I could make hard decisions under pressure. She hired me. And that startup became Whitmore Solutions. The weight of the revelation settled over the office. Clara Whitmore hadn't just succeeded despite her choice. She'd built an empire because of it. I'm telling you this because yesterday, when you stood up and left, I saw myself. And my first instinct was to reject you because I was angry, not at you, but at a system that makes parents like us feel like we have to choose between our children and our survival. That was unfair. You deserved better. Evan's throat was tight. Miss Whitmore, thank you, but the position is filled, and I understand the position isn't filled. I haven't interviewed anyone else. I didn't want to. Clara met his eyes steadily. I want to offer you the job, Mr. Brooks, if you're still interested. The words didn't make sense at first. Evan heard them, processed them individually, but strung together they seemed impossible. A job. She was offering him a job. I don't understand, he managed finally. I left the interview. I didn't even finish. You showed me everything I needed to see. Your resume showed me your skills. Your certification showed me your qualifications. But yesterday, you showed me your character. And character is what I build this company on. Evan wanted to believe it. Wanted to grab onto this lifeline with both hands and hold on for dear life. But 3 years of rejection had taught him to be skeptical of good news. What about the gap in my employment? The 3 years I spent raising your daughter alone after losing your wife? That's not a gap, Mr. Brooks. That's experience. You managed a household on a limited budget. That's financial planning. You coordinated schedules and appointments and school events. That's project management. You solved problems under pressure with limited resources. That's exactly what this position requires. Clara smiled slightly. Besides, some of my best employees are parents. They don't waste time. They don't create drama. They just get the work done so they can get home to what matters. It was everything Evan had tried to say in 17 other interviews, but phrased by someone who actually believed it, someone who understood. The salary is $68,000 annually, Clara continued, with full benefits including health insurance for you and your daughter, dental, vision, 4 weeks paid vacation, flexible hours when family needs arise. I know that's probably more than you were making before, but the role has expanded since you last worked in this field. $68,000. Evan's last job had paid $45,000. This was more money than he'd ever made, more than he'd allowed himself to hope for. health insurance, 4 weeks vacation, flexible hours. It was too much, too good. There had to be a catch. Why? The question came out raw. Why would you do this? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Claire's expression softened. Because someone did it for me when I needed it most, and because I believe that how we treat people when they're at their lowest says everything about who we are. You needed a chance, Mr. Brooks. I'm giving you one. What you do with it is up to you. Evan looked down at his hands, rough from 3 years of manual labor he'd picked up when desperate, loading trucks, painting apartments, anything that paid cash and didn't ask questions. He thought about Lily at home with Mrs. Chen, the bandage on her forehead, the trust in her eyes when she asked if they were going to be okay. He thought about the eviction notice, the medical bills, the credit cards and utilities, and all the weight he'd been carrying alone. And he thought about Sarah, about what she would say if she were here. She'd tell him to take the job, to accept help when it was offered, to let someone else carry some of the weight for once. I don't know what to say, Evan admitted. Say yes. Say you'll start Monday. Say you'll give this company your best effort, and I'll do everything in my power to make sure you succeed. Evan looked up at Clara Whitmore, CEO, success story, single mother who'd turned her own desperation into empire, and saw understanding in her eyes. Not pity, not charity, just recognition of one survivor seeing another. Yes, he said, and the word felt like the first breath after drowning. Yes, I'll take the job. Thank you. Thank you so much. Clara extended her hand, and this time when Evan shook it, his palm wasn't sweaty with nerves. It was steady with something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. Clara released his hand and moved to her desk, pulling out a folder that looked already prepared, as if she'd been planning this conversation before Evan had even walked through the door. The realization made his chest tighten with something he couldn't quite name, gratitude mixed with disbelief, the feeling of being seen after years of invisibility. I'll have HR draw up the official paperwork, but I wanted to give you this now. She handed him the folder. It's an advance. 2 weeks' salary paid today. Consider it a signing bonus to help you get settled. Evan opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside was a check made out to him for $5,230. He stared at the numbers, trying to make them real, trying to believe this wasn't some elaborate dream he'd wake from any moment. Ms. Whitmore, I can't. This is too much. It's what you've earned, what you'll earn. Her voice was firm, businesslike, but not unkind. Mr. Brooks, I'm not doing this out of charity. I'm doing it because you're the right person for this position, and I need you to be able to show up on Monday ready to work. If you're worried about keeping the lights on or feeding your daughter, you won't be focused. This advance removes those immediate concerns. I don't know how to thank you. Thank me by doing excellent work, by being the employee I believe you can be. Clara returned to her seat across from him. Now, there are some practicalities we need to discuss. You'll be working under David Chen, no relation to your neighbor, I assume. He's our director of operations. Good man, fair manager, high standards. Your primary responsibility will be coordinating our supply chain logistics across 3 regional warehouses. It's complex work, but based on your previous experience at Brightwell, you already understand the fundamentals. Evan nodded, his mind racing to catch up. Supply chain logistics. Regional warehouses. These were real responsibilities, real work that would require his full attention and expertise. This wasn't a pity position created to make him feel better. Clara was trusting him with something substantial. You'll have a team of 4 reporting to you, Clara continued. They're good people. Though one of them, Marcus, can be territorial. Don't let him intimidate you. You're his supervisor for a reason. She paused, studying him. Can you handle that? Managing people who may question your authority because of your time away? Yes, Evan said, and meant it. He dealt with worse than territorial employees. He dealt with grief counselors who didn't understand why he couldn't just move on, with social workers who questioned his ability to parent alone, with teachers who looked at Lily's quiet moments and saw trauma instead of thoughtfulness. I can handle it. Good. Because there's something else you should know. Clara's expression became more serious. This company has a culture I've worked very hard to build. We support our employees because I believe that people do their best work when they're not drowning in personal crisis. If Lily gets sick, if she has a school event, if you need to leave early for a parent-teacher conference, you tell your manager, you handle your responsibility, and you don't apologize for being a parent. That's not a weakness here. It's not even a complication. It's just life. The words landed like a benediction. Evan had spent 3 years apologizing, for Sarah's death derailing his career, for needing flexibility, for having a child who sometimes needed him during business hours. The idea that he could stop apologizing felt almost radical. However, Clara added, her tone sharpening slightly, that support goes both ways. I expect excellence. I expect commitment. I expect you to manage your time well enough that your family needs don't compromise your work quality. Can you do that? I can. I will. Then we understand each other. Clara stood and Evan quickly followed suit. HR is on the 32nd floor. Kelly Martinez runs that department. She'll get you set up with all the paperwork, your benefits enrollment, everything you need. Do you have time now, or do you need to get back to your daughter? Evan glanced at his watch. 9:45. Mrs. Chen would be with Lily until noon, and the doctor had said she should rest anyway. This was more important than hovering over her while she slept. I have time now. Perfect. I'll walk you down and introduce you. Clara grabbed her phone and her keys, moving with the efficient purpose of someone whose time was valuable, but who chose to spend it on this anyway. As they left her office, she added almost casually, by the way, there's an employee discount program for childcare, several quality centers near the office. You might want to look into that for the summer. The practicality of it, already thinking ahead to summer, to Lily's needs, to the logistics of Evan's new life, made the whole thing feel suddenly, overwhelmingly real. He was going to work here. He was going to bring Lily to childcare near this gleaming building. He was going to have health insurance and vacation days, and a team of people who reported to him. He was going to be okay. The elevator ride down 2 floors felt surreal. Clara made small talk about the building, pointing out the cafeteria on the 28th floor, the gym in the basement that employees could use, the quiet room on each floor for nursing mothers or anyone who needed a moment of privacy. Each amenity she mentioned was another reminder of how far removed this world was from the one Evan had been surviving in. The HR department was smaller than he'd expected, more intimate. Kelly Martinez turned out to be a woman in her early 50s with warm eyes and an efficiency that reminded Evan of Mrs. Chen. Clara made quick introductions, handed Evan off with instructions to take care of him, and disappeared back to her own floor with the kind of seamless exit that suggested this was routine for her. So, Kelly said, settling Evan into a chair in her office, welcome to Whitmore Solutions. I hear you're starting Monday? Yes, ma'am. None of that ma'am stuff. I'm Kelly. She pulled up something on her computer. Let's start with the basics. Full name, social security number, current address, though Clara mentioned you might be relocating soon. Evan blinked. Relocating? She said you were between residences. If you need help finding a place, we have a relocation specialist who works with new employees. It's part of our benefits package. Of course, Clara had mentioned the eviction. Of course, she'd already thought 3 steps ahead to solve a problem Evan hadn't even brought up. He didn't know whether to feel grateful or embarrassed that his circumstances were so transparent. That would be helpful, he admitted. We are looking for a new apartment. Great. I'll send you Elena's contact information. She's a wizard at finding good places within budget. Now, let's talk about your benefits enrollment. The next hour was a blur of forms and options and decisions Evan had never thought he'd get to make again. Health insurance with a choice of 3 plans. He chose the mid-tier one that would cover Lily's prescriptions and any future emergency room visits without bankrupting them. Dental insurance, vision insurance. A 401k with employer matching that Kelly strongly encouraged him to contribute to, even if just a small percentage. I know it seems like you can't afford to save when you're still catching up, Kelly said gently, but trust me, future you will thank present you for starting now. Evan signed up for 3%, the minimum to get the company match. It felt like betting on a future he wasn't sure he'd have, but Kelly's confidence was contagious. Then came the direct deposit forms, the emergency contact information. He put down Mrs. Chen, hoping she wouldn't mind, and finally, the advance payment authorization. This will be ready for pickup this afternoon, Kelly said. We can do a direct deposit, but that usually takes a few days to process, and Clara wanted you to have access immediately. Will a check work for you? A check is perfect, thank you. You can pick it up from reception after 3 o'clock. Just show ID. Kelly sat back, reviewing her screen. I think that's everything for now. You'll get a full orientation packet on Monday, including your building access card, parking information if you need it, and your company laptop. David Chen will walk you through your first week schedule. Any questions? Evan had 1,000 questions, but none that Kelly could answer. Questions like, how do I deserve this, and what if I fail, and will this really be enough to save us? Instead, he asked, what's the dress code? Kelly laughed. Business casual unless you have client meetings, then business formal. David's pretty relaxed about it as long as you look professional. Jeans are fine on Fridays. She paused, then added more quietly, and Evan, I've worked here for 12 years. Clara doesn't hire people she doesn't believe in. If she offered you this job, it's because she knows you can do it. Don't waste energy doubting that, okay? The kindness in her voice made Evan's throat tight. Okay. After he left HR, Evan stood in the elevator bay for a long moment, just breathing. The folder with all his paperwork felt heavy in his hands, weighted with possibility and responsibility. The check wouldn't be ready until 3 o'clock. He had 5 hours to fill, 5 hours before he could hold that piece of paper that would change everything. He should go home, check on Lily, make sure she was resting comfortably. But his hands were shaking with adrenaline and disbelief, and he needed to move, needed to do something with all the energy suddenly coursing through him. Evan pulled out his phone and called Mrs. Chen. Evan, how did it go? Did you get your briefcase? I got it. And Mrs. Chen, I got the job. There was a brief silence, then a sound that might have been a small sob. Oh, honey. Oh, that's wonderful. I'm so happy for you. Is Lily awake? Can I talk to her? She's resting, but let me get her. Evan heard rustling, soft voices, then Lily's sleepy greeting. Daddy? Hey, baby. How are you feeling? Tired? My head hurts a little, but Mrs. Chen gave me the medicine. A pause. Did you get your briefcase? I did. And Lily, I have some good news. The interview I went to yesterday, they want to hire me. I start on Monday. The squeal that came through the phone made Evan pull it away from his ear, grinning despite himself. When he brought it back, Lily was talking so fast the words tumbled over each other. Really? Really, truly? Daddy, that's amazing. Does this mean we can stay in our apartment? Does this mean everything's going to be okay? It means things are going to get better. A lot better. Evan's voice caught. We're going to be okay, sweetheart. I promise. I told you they'd hire you. I told you you're the best daddy in the world. After he hung up, Evan stood in that corporate hallway and let himself feel it. The relief, the gratitude, the sheer overwhelming weight of hope after years of its absence. He was 23 stories above the ground in a building that had seemed impossible yesterday, holding proof that sometimes, against all odds, things could turn around. His phone buzzed with a text from Clara. Elena from relocation will call you this afternoon. Also, take Monday to settle in, but plan to have lunch with David and me on Tuesday. Want to make sure you're set up for success. Evan typed back a quick thank you, then headed for the elevator. He had hours to kill before the check was ready, and suddenly he knew exactly what he needed to do. The hospital billing office was buried in the basement level of St. Mary's, a warren of cubicles and filing cabinets that hummed with fluorescent light and the sound of ringing phones. Evan found Jennifer from yesterday behind a desk piled with folders. Mr. Brooks? She said, looking surprised. I wasn't expecting to see you so soon. Did you have questions about the financial assistance application? Actually, I wanted to talk about payment. Evan sat down across from her. I'm going to pay the full amount. I just started a new job and I'll get my first check today. It won't cover everything, but I can make a substantial down payment and set up automatic monthly payments for the rest. Jennifer's eyebrows rose. That's wonderful news about the job. Congratulations. But Mr. Brooks, you should still apply for the assistance program. Even with employment, $8,000 is a significant burden. The program exists exactly for situations like this. I appreciate that, but I want to pay what I owe. My daughter received excellent care. You saved her, took care of her, and I should pay for that. That's very honorable, but can I make a down payment today and set up the rest on a payment plan? Jennifer studied him for a moment, then pulled up his account on her computer. What kind of down payment are you thinking? Evan did quick math in his head. The check was for $5,230. He needed first and last month's rent for a new place. Call it $3,000 to be safe. That left over $2,000 for the hospital. $2,000 today. Then I can do $400 a month until it's paid off. That works. Let me set that up for you. Jennifer's fingers flew across the keyboard. You know, in 12 years of doing this job, I don't think I've ever had someone come back within 24 hours to set up payments. Most people avoid us for months. I've spent 3 years avoiding problems because I didn't have the resources to face them, Evan said quietly. I have resources now, time to stop avoiding. The payment plan took 20 minutes to set up. Jennifer was thorough, walking him through every detail, making sure he understood the terms and the timeline. When she handed him the paperwork to sign, she smiled. Your daughter is lucky to have you, Mr. Brooks. I'm the lucky one, Evan said, and meant it. He left the hospital feeling lighter than he had in years, despite having just committed to months of payments. There was power in facing obligations head-on, and having a plan and the means to execute it. For so long, he'd been at the mercy of circumstances. Now he was taking control, and it felt like breathing after being underwater. The afternoon passed in a blur of necessary errands. Evan withdrew the maximum allowed from an ATM using the advance check, $500 in cash that he immediately used to pay the most urgent bills. The electricity company first to stop the threatened shutoff. Then a partial payment to the landlord, along with a phone call explaining that he'd have the full amount owed within the week. The landlord, Mr. Harrison, sounded skeptical. You said that 3 weeks ago, Brooks. I know, but I have a job now, starting Monday. I can get you proof of employment if you need it. A long pause. Get me $2,000 by Friday, and we'll call off the eviction. But Brooks, this is your last chance. I can't keep making exceptions. You won't have to. I'll have the money Friday. $2,000 by Friday meant Evan would be left with almost nothing from the advance, but it would buy him time. Time to get his first real paycheck. Time to find a better apartment. Time to build something stable for Lily instead of this constant scramble to stay one step ahead of disaster. At 3 o'clock, Evan returned to Whitmore Solutions. The receptionist on the 34th floor had his check waiting in an envelope. Evan held it for a moment before opening it, this small piece of paper that represented everything changing. Mr. Brooks? He looked up. A man in his late 40s stood before him, Asian features, friendly expression, hand extended. I'm David Chen. Claire asked me to introduce myself if I saw you. Welcome to the team. This was his future boss. Evan shook his hand firmly. Thank you. I'm looking forward to working with you. Likewise. Clara speaks highly of you, which doesn't happen often. She's selective about who she brings on. David smiled. You're joining us at a busy time. We're in the middle of restructuring our entire West Coast distribution network. But that also means you'll have the chance to make an immediate impact. They talked for a few minutes about the position, about David's expectations, and management style. He was warm but professional, the kind of leader who seemed to actually care about his team's success. When they parted ways, Evan felt even more confident that this opportunity was real, that he could do this work, that he belonged here. The bank was his last stop before heading home. He deposited the check, watching the teller process it with the kind of careful attention that suggested she didn't often handle checks this large from customers with accounts as empty as Evan's had been. When she handed him the deposit receipt and his account balance showed $5,230, plus the $47 that had been there before, Evan had to blink back tears. He'd been in overdraft or near zero for so long that seeing 4 digits in his account felt surreal. This was breathing room. This was possibility. This was the beginning of something different. On the bus ride home, Evan pulled out his phone and opened the search browser. He typed in 2-bedroom apartments near Whitmore Solutions and started scrolling through listings. Most were out of his price range, but a few looked promising. One in particular caught his eye, a modest complex 15 minutes from the office by bus, 2 bedrooms, updated kitchen, on-site laundry. The rent was $1,400 a month, more than he'd been paying but manageable with his new salary. He saved the listing, then added a reminder to call Elena, the relocation specialist, tomorrow. For the first time in 3 years, he was planning ahead instead of just surviving day to day. The shift felt monumental. When Evan finally opened the door to their apartment, he found Lily on the couch where he'd left her that morning, but now she was sitting up, coloring intently. Mrs. Chen was in the kitchen making soup, and the whole place smelled like home. "Daddy!" Lily carefully set down her crayons and stood up, moving slowly because of her head. "You're back!" Evan swept her into a gentle hug, mindful of her stitches. "I'm back, and I have so much to tell you." Over dinner, Mrs. Chen's soup plus some bread Evan had picked up, he told Lily about the job, about the salary, about the health insurance that meant she could go to the doctor whenever she needed, without him having to choose between her health and their rent. He told her about the new apartment they'd look for, maybe one with a small balcony or a park nearby. "And you'll have your own room," he said. "A real one, not just a corner of mine with a curtain for privacy." Lily's eyes went wide. "My own room? Really?" "Really. You can decorate it however you want. We'll paint it, get you a new bed, make it perfect. Can I have purple walls? And maybe some stars on the ceiling like Mommy used to talk about?" The mention of Sarah didn't hurt quite as much as it used to. Purple walls and stars. "I promise." After dinner, Mrs. Chen hugged them both and headed home, refusing Evan's offer of money for watching Lily even though he could finally afford to pay her. "You save that for my great niece," she said, meaning Lily. "Get her something special." Alone with his daughter, Evan felt the full weight of the day finally settle over him. 24 hours ago, he'd been sitting in Clara Whitmore's office about to have his 18th interview go wrong. Now he had a job, a plan, and hope for the first time since Sarah died. "Daddy?" Lily was looking at him with that serious expression she got when she was thinking hard about something. "Are you happy?" The question surprised him. "Yes, baby, I'm very happy." "Why?" "Because you're smiling, like really smiling. You haven't done that in a long time." Evan pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. "I haven't had much to smile about lately, but that's changing now. Things are going to be different, Lily. Better. I promise you that." "Because of the nice lady who gave you the job?" "Ms. Whitmore, yes. She took a chance on me when no one else would. That's pretty special." "You should write her a thank you note," Lily said matter-of-factly. "That's what you always tell me to do when someone is nice to me." Out of the mouths of children. Evan smiled. "You're absolutely right. I should do that." That night, after Lily was asleep, her vital signs checked one last time, pain medication administered, Mr. Whiskers tucked in beside her, Evan sat at the small kitchen table and pulled out a piece of paper. He'd never been good at expressing emotion in writing, had always been more comfortable with numbers and logistics than words and feelings. But Lily was right. Clara Whitmore deserved more than just a verbal thank you. He started writing, crossing out sentences, starting over. Eventually, he found words that felt true. "Dear Ms. Whitmore, I've been trying to find the right words to express my gratitude for the opportunity you've given me, and I'm realizing there probably aren't right words for something this significant. You didn't just offer me a job, you offered me a future. You saw past the gaps in my resume and the chaos of my circumstances to something I'd stopped seeing in myself. For 3 years, I've been trying to be both mother and father to my daughter, to hold together a life that kept falling apart no matter how hard I worked. I've walked out of countless interviews feeling like a failure, like the choice to raise Lily myself was a mistake that would haunt me forever. Yesterday, you changed that narrative entirely. You showed me that being a good parent isn't a liability, it's a strength. I don't know what I did to deserve this chance, but I promise you won't regret taking it. I will work harder than anyone else in that building. I will prove that your faith in me was well placed, and someday, when I'm in a position to do so, I'll pay forward the kindness you've shown me. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for caring. Thank you for being the person who ran after me when everyone else let me walk away. With deepest gratitude, Evan Brooks." He read it over twice, then folded it and put it in an envelope. He'd drop it off Monday morning before his orientation. It wasn't enough. Nothing could be enough to repay what Clara had done, but it was something. It was acknowledgement and gratitude and a promise. Evan looked around their small apartment, shabby but clean, temporary but home, and let himself imagine the future. A new place with room for Lily to grow, stable income that didn't require him to choose between electricity and groceries, health insurance that meant he could take her to the doctor without panic, a job that challenged him, that made him feel useful and capable instead of desperate and diminished. It was almost too much to believe, almost too good to trust. But the check deposit receipt was still in his wallet, tangible proof that this was real. Clara Whitmore had chased him down a hallway, had seen his worth when he'd stopped seeing it himself, had offered him not just employment, but dignity. And on Monday, Evan would walk into Whitmore Solutions not as a desperate job seeker, but as an employee, a member of the team, someone with value and purpose, and a future worth building. He thought about Clara's story, about how she'd walked out of that board meeting 15 years ago to care for her sick son, how that choice had cost her everything and eventually given her everything. He thought about the parallel between their lives, the way desperation and determination could look so similar, the way rock bottom was sometimes just the foundation for something better. Evan pulled out his phone one more time and looked at the photograph he'd retrieved from his briefcase. Sarah and Lily at the beach, both laughing, frozen in a moment of pure joy. For 3 years, this picture had felt like a memorial to something lost. But tonight it felt different. It felt like a reminder of what was possible, of the happiness they'd had and the happiness that could exist again. "I'm going to make you proud," Evan whispered to Sarah's image. "Both of you. I'm going to build the life she deserves, the life we all deserve." Outside his window, the city glittered with a million lights, each one representing someone else's life, someone else's struggle and hope and determination. Somewhere out there was Clara Whitmore, probably still working even at this hour, building her empire one thoughtful decision at a time. Somewhere out there was the new apartment they'd move into, the new life they'd build, the new version of themselves they'd become. And here, in this shabby apartment with its broken elevator and its eviction notice that would soon be meaningless, Evan Brooks sat at his kitchen table and let himself feel something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not because everything was perfect. Lily still had stitches in her forehead. They still had to move. The medical bills still existed. But because for the first time in so long, he had the tools to handle what came next. He had resources and support, and most importantly, he had hope that was based on reality instead of desperate wishing. Monday would come, and with it would come new challenges and responsibilities, and the pressure of proving himself in a role he hadn't held in years. But Evan wasn't afraid of hard work. He'd been doing hard work for 3 years, the hardest work there was, raising a child alone, keeping them both alive and together and functioning. Everything else was just details. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation and possibility. Saturday morning, Evan woke early and made the phone call he'd been dreading, to Mr. Harrison, the landlord, to arrange payment pickup. He met the man in the building's dingy office, counting out $2,000 in cash with hands that didn't shake anymore. Mr. Harrison counted it twice, then pulled out the eviction notice and stamped it with red ink. Resolved. "I'm still moving," Evan told him. "I'll be out by the end of the month, but I wanted to leave on good terms." Mr. Harrison had the decency to look slightly ashamed. "You're a good tenant, Brooks. Quiet. Keep the place clean. I'm sorry it came to this." It didn't. It came to something better. By Saturday afternoon, Elena from the relocation department had called and scheduled a viewing for the apartment Evan had found online. She met him and Lily at the complex, a woman in her 30s with an efficient manner and genuine warmth. "Mr. Brooks, this is a solid choice," she said as they walked through the empty 2-bedroom unit. "The neighborhood is safe, good schools nearby, and the commute to the office is reasonable. The landlord here is reputable. I've worked with them before." Lily ran from room to room, her bandage still white against her forehead, but her energy returning. "Daddy, look! This room has a window seat. Can this be my room?" The space was modest but clean, newly painted in neutral tones that Evan could already imagine transforming. The kitchen was updated, the bathroom had a working shower with good water pressure, and the living room had enough space for their secondhand furniture plus room to grow. What do you think? Elena asked quietly while Lily explored. I think it's perfect, Evan said. What do I need to do to secure it? Elena already had the paperwork ready. First and last month's rent, security deposit, application fee, it added up to just over $4,000, nearly everything left from the advance after his payments to the hospital and landlord. But his first real paycheck would come in 2 weeks, and he'd budgeted carefully. They'd be tight, but they'd make it. He signed the lease that afternoon. Move-in date? Next Friday, giving them a week to pack and transition. Lily bounced on her toes as Elena handed Evan the keys. We have a new home, she whispered, like saying it too loud might break the spell. A real home, Daddy. We do, baby. We really do. Sunday was spent sorting through their belongings, deciding what to keep and what to let go. 3 years of poverty had taught Evan not to accumulate much. They'd sold anything of value long ago, but there were still decisions to make. Clothes Lily had outgrown, kitchen items they'd never use, the remnants of a life that no longer fit. Mrs. Chen came by with boxes she'd collected from the grocery store, and together they packed while Lily organized her stuffed animals by order of importance. Mr. Whiskers remained number 1, but there was now a whole ranking system for the others. You know, Mrs. Chen said as she wrapped dishes in newspaper, I've watched you struggle for 3 years, Evan. Never complaining, always putting that girl first. I'm so proud of you for not giving up. There were times I wanted to, Evan admitted. Times I didn't think I could keep going. But you did. That's what matters. She placed a wrapped plate carefully in the box. And now look at you. New job, new apartment, new start. Sarah would be so proud. The mention of his wife still carried weight, but it was different now. Less like grief and more like memory, the kind that hurt but also healed. I hope so, Evan said quietly. I really hope so. That evening, Evan laid out his clothes for Monday. The same suit he'd worn to the interview, but he'd taken it to the dry cleaner Saturday morning using some of the advance money. It came back pressed and fresh, looking almost new. He'd bought 2 new shirts at a discount store, plain blue and white, that would work for the first week until his first paycheck let him build a more professional wardrobe. He set 3 alarms on his phone for 5 a.m. He couldn't be late. Not on his first day. Not when Clara Whitmore had taken such a chance on him. Sleep came fitfully, Evan's mind racing with scenarios and possibilities. What if he'd forgotten everything about supply chain management? What if his team didn't respect him? What if Marcus, the territorial one David had mentioned, made his life difficult? What if he failed Clara's faith in him? But underneath the anxiety was something stronger, determination. He'd survived 3 years of impossible circumstances. He'd kept his daughter safe and fed and loved through the worst period of both their lives. Surely he could handle corporate logistics and difficult coworkers. At 4:57 a.m., 3 minutes before his first alarm, Evan was already awake and in the shower. He dressed carefully, checked his appearance in the mirror 3 times, and made sure his briefcase contained everything he might need, the orientation packet Kelly had given him, a notepad, pens, the thank you letter for Clara. Lily appeared in his doorway at 6:15, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Is it time? Almost. What are you doing up so early? I wanted to see you before you left, to tell you good luck. She patted over and hugged him carefully. You're going to be amazing, Daddy. Evan held her close, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo, feeling the absolute trust in her embrace. I love you, sweetheart. Mrs. Chen will be here in an hour to take you to school, okay? You're cleared to go back today, but if your head hurts, I'll tell the nurse. I know. She pulled back and looked up at him seriously. Don't be nervous. They already know you're the best. That's why they hired you. Out of the mouths of children, Evan thought again. He kissed the top of her head and headed for the door. The bus ride downtown felt different this time. Evan wasn't traveling toward uncertainty and probable rejection. He was commuting to work, joining the stream of professionals heading to their offices, being part of the city's productive rhythm instead of struggling against it. He arrived at Whitmore Solutions at 7:45, 15 minutes earlier than necessary. The security guard, whose name tag read Marcus, which made Evan smile at the coincidence, waved him through after checking his ID. First day? That obvious? Marcus grinned. You've got that look. Don't worry, it's a good place to work. Miss Whitmore takes care of her people. The reception desk on the 34th floor was unstaffed this early, but Evan found an envelope with his name on it containing his building access card and a temporary password for the computer system. Attached was a note in Clara's handwriting. Report to David's office, 34C. Welcome aboard. David Chen's office was smaller than Clara's, but still impressive, with windows overlooking a different angle of the city. David was already there, tie loosened, coffee in hand, reviewing something on his computer screen. Evan? Right on time. Actually early. I like that. He stood and shook Evan's hand warmly. Coffee. I have a pot going constantly. Please. They sat at a small conference table in David's office, and for the next hour, David walked Evan through everything he needed to know. The team structure, the current projects, the expectations and deliverables. It was a lot of information, but Evan found himself absorbing it eagerly, his mind clicking back into professional mode like a muscle remembering its function. Your team is good people, David said. Sarah Lynn handles data analytics. She's brilliant but quiet. Ramon Cortez manages vendor relations. Gregarious, knows everyone in the industry. Keisha Washington coordinates the actual warehouse operations. Tough as nails, doesn't suffer fools. And Marcus Tremont, the territorial one, Evan finished. David smiled ruefully. Clara warned you. Yeah, Marcus. He's been here 5 years, expected to get your position when it opened up. He's competent, but he lacks the strategic thinking Clara wanted for this role. He'll test you, try to undermine your authority. Don't take it personally, and don't let him walk over you. Set boundaries early. Understood. Good. Now you'll spend this morning getting set up, computer access, meeting the team, getting oriented. This afternoon, Clara wants to have lunch with us in her office. She does that with all new hires in key positions. It's part mentorship, part evaluation. Just be yourself. That's who she hired. At 9 a.m., David led Evan down the hall to a large open workspace where his team sat in a cluster of cubicles surrounding what would be Evan's office, a real office with walls and a door and a window. It wasn't huge, but after 3 years of nothing, it felt palatial. Everyone, David called out, and 4 people looked up from their work. This is Evan Brooks, your new coordinator. Evan, meet your team. Sarah Lynn was exactly as David had described. Petite, reserved, with sharp eyes that assessed Evan quickly. She shook his hand with a firm grip. Welcome. I've prepared some reports for you to review when you're ready. Ramon Cortez bounded over with the energy of someone who genuinely loved people. Evan, great to have you, man. If you need anything, and I mean anything, you just let me know. I know every supplier, every vendor, every contact worth knowing. Keisha Washington's handshake was businesslike, her expression neutral. Mr. Brooks, I'm looking forward to working with you. Warehouse operations is a complex beast, but I'll make sure you understand the full scope. And then there was Marcus Tremont, tall, mid-30s, with the kind of polished appearance that came from years in corporate environments. His handshake was just slightly too firm, his smile just slightly too tight. Marcus, I've heard a lot about your work here. Looking forward to learning from your experience. Something flickered in Marcus's expression. Surprise, maybe, that Evan had led with deference instead of authority. We'll see how it goes, he said noncommittally. The morning passed in a whirlwind of orientation activities. It came to set up his computer access and email. Kelly from HR stopped by with more paperwork. David checked in twice to make sure everything was going smoothly. And Evan's team, with varying degrees of enthusiasm, began to bring him up to speed on their current projects. Sarah's data reports were comprehensive and slightly overwhelming. Ramon walked him through their vendor relationships with entertaining anecdotes about everyone in the industry. Keisha gave him a brutally honest assessment of their warehouse efficiency metrics and where they were falling short. Marcus, notably, was scarce. He disappeared into meetings and phone calls, making himself unavailable for the introductions Evan had tried to arrange. The message was clear. He wasn't going to make this easy. But Evan had faced harder challenges than a resentful coworker. He made notes, asked questions, and began to piece together the landscape of his new responsibilities. It was complex work, exactly as Clara had promised, but it was also familiar. The fundamentals hadn't changed. It was still about coordination, communication, and strategic problem solving. Skills he'd had before, skills he was rapidly remembering how to use. At 11:30, David appeared at his door. Ready for lunch with the boss? Evan's stomach tightened with nerves, but he nodded. Ready. Clara's office felt different today. Still impressive, still immaculate, but somehow more welcoming. She'd had lunch brought in from somewhere upscale, spread out on the small conference table by her windows. Real china, not takeout containers. Evan, David, sit please. Clara gestured to the chairs. I thought we could have a working lunch, discuss how the morning went and what you can expect going forward. They settled in, and Clara served them herself. Grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, quinoa salad, the kind of food Evan hadn't eaten in years, the kind he couldn't even afford in the grocery store. So, Clara said as they began eating, first impressions? Overwhelming in the best way, Evan answered honestly. The scope of the work is significant, but my team seems strong. Well, most of them. David snorted. Marcus being Marcus? He's making his feelings known through absence, Evan said diplomatically. Clara set down her fork, her expression becoming more serious. Let me be clear about something, Evan. I hired you over Marcus for specific reasons. He's good at execution, but he doesn't think strategically. He doesn't innovate. He does what he's told and does it well, but this position requires more. It requires someone who can see 3 steps ahead, who can identify problems before they become crises, who can lead instead of just manage. I saw that in you during our interview, she continued, the way you talked about your previous work, the way you approached problem solving. But more than that, I saw someone who understands that leadership isn't about authority. It's about responsibility. You've been leading for 3 years, making impossible decisions with limited resources, prioritizing and adapting, and finding ways forward when there didn't seem to be any. That's exactly what this role requires. The confidence in her voice made Evan sit up straighter. Thank you. I won't let you down. I know you won't, but I also want you to know that I don't expect perfection. You're going to make mistakes. Everyone does, especially in the first few months. What matters is how you handle them. Own your errors, learn from them, and don't make the same mistake twice. She paused. And if Marcus or anyone else gives you trouble, you come to me or David immediately. We don't tolerate territorial nonsense here. They spent the rest of lunch discussing the strategic initiatives Clara wanted Evan to focus on, streamlining the West Coast distribution network, improving vendor contract negotiations, implementing a new inventory tracking system. Big projects with real impact. I'm giving you significant autonomy, Clara said as lunch wound down. David is your direct supervisor, but I want you to think independently, to bring me solutions instead of just problems. Can you do that? Yes, Evan said firmly. I can. After lunch, as David headed back to his office, Clara gestured for Evan to stay for a moment. I wanted to ask about your daughter. How is she? The question, personal and genuine, caught Evan off guard. She's good. Back to school today, healing well. The stitches come out next week. I'm glad. And I meant what I said about family needs. If she has appointments or school events, you coordinate with David and you handle it. Your work quality matters, not the specific hours you're at your desk. I appreciate that more than you know. Clara smiled, and for a moment she looked less like a CEO and more like the single mother she'd once been. I know exactly how much you appreciate it, because I've been exactly where you are. Now go make the most of this opportunity, Evan. Show me that my instincts about you were right. The afternoon brought more orientation activities, more meetings with team members, more information to absorb. But around 3 p.m., Marcus finally appeared in Evan's doorway. You have a minute? Of course, come in. Marcus closed the door behind him, which felt ominous. He sat in the chair across from Evan's desk, his posture radiating barely contained frustration. Let me be straight with you, Marcus said. I've been here 5 years. I know these systems inside and out. I know the vendors, the warehouse managers, the whole operation. I expected to get this job, so having someone waltz in from nowhere and take it, that's a tough pill to swallow. Evan appreciated the honesty, even if the hostility behind it was clear. I understand that, and I'm not here to pretend I know more than you do about the day-to-day operations. I'm going to need your expertise, Marcus. You have institutional knowledge I don't have. But you have Clara's ear, Marcus said bitterly. You have the title and the authority and apparently the magic story that convinced her you're better than someone who's been loyal to this company for 5 years. There it was, the real issue. Not competence, but favoritism. Not capability, but circumstances. Evan leaned back in his chair, considering his response carefully. "You're right that I don't have your history here," Evan said slowly. "But I do have 15 years of supply chain experience, including 5 years in a senior coordinator role at a major firm. I have certifications in logistics management and project coordination. And I have 3 years of experience managing complex systems under extreme resource constraints. That's what Clara hired. Not a magic story, not favoritism, skills and experience that match what this position requires." Marcus's jaw tightened. "We'll see how long that lasts when you actually have to do the work." "I guess we will," Evan said calmly. "But Marcus, I want you to know something. I'm not your enemy. I'm not here to prove you're incompetent or to push you out. I'm here to do a job, and I need a strong team to do it well. You can be part of that team, or you can fight me every step of the way. But only one of those options benefits you professionally." Marcus stood abruptly. "I'll do my job, but don't expect me to make yours easier." After he left, Evan sat in his office for a long moment, staring at the closed door. This was going to be a challenge, but challenges were something Evan understood. He'd been facing them for 3 years, and he'd survived every single one. The rest of the week followed a similar pattern. Evan absorbed information, built relationships with Sarah and Ramon and Keisha, who all seemed willing to give him a chance. Marcus remained distant and occasionally obstructive, but not quite insubordinate enough to warrant formal intervention. By Friday, Evan felt like he was beginning to find his footing. The work was complex but manageable. His team was functional, if not entirely cohesive, and he was starting to see the strategic opportunities Clara had mentioned. There were inefficiencies in their vendor contracts, redundancies in their warehouse operations, opportunities to streamline and improve. Friday afternoon, as Evan was preparing to leave for the day, his first week complete, his first paycheck deposited that morning, David stopped by his office. "Survived week 1. How do you feel?" "Like I drank from a fire hose," Evan admitted. Evans, "But in a good way. I'm starting to see the full picture." "That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Listen, Claire and I have been talking, and we'd like you to take the lead on the West Coast distribution project. It's the biggest initiative we have going right now, and it'll be highly visible. Interested?" Evan's heart rate picked up. This was exactly the kind of opportunity he'd been hoping for, a chance to prove his value, to make a real impact. "Absolutely interested." "Good. We'll set up a project kickoff meeting for Monday afternoon. Start thinking about your approach over the weekend." David paused. "And Evan?" "You're doing great. Really great. Claire's impressed, and so am I." After David left, Evan packed up his things and headed out, stopping at Clara's office on the way. She was still working, naturally, even though it was after 5 on a Friday. "Evan, heading out?" "Yes, but I wanted to give you this before I left." He handed her the envelope containing his thank you letter. "I wrote this over the weekend, but I wanted to wait until I'd actually started the job to give it to you, to make sure I could thank you for something real, not just potential." Clara took the envelope, her expression curious. "You didn't need to do this." "I did, actually. My daughter reminded me that when someone changes your life, you say thank you properly." After he left, Evan walked out of the Whitmore Solutions building into the late afternoon sun, feeling like a different person than the one who'd walked in 5 days ago. His briefcase contained project notes and strategic plans instead of desperate resumes. His bank account showed a balance that could actually cover their bills with money left over. His daughter had a new home waiting, and he had the means to make it everything she deserved. The bus ride home gave him time to reflect on the week. It had been challenging, sometimes overwhelming, occasionally frustrating when dealing with Marcus. But it had also been invigorating, engaging, the kind of work that made him feel capable and valuable instead of desperate and diminished. When he got home, Lily was already there with Mrs. Chen, homework spread across the kitchen table. She looked up as he entered, and her face lit up. "How was your week, Daddy?" "It was good, baby, really good." He set down his briefcase and joined her at the table. "They gave me a big project to lead. It's going to be a lot of work, but it's exciting." "Are they nice to you there, the people you work with?" Evan thought about Sarah's quiet competence, Ramon's enthusiasm, Keisha's no-nonsense professionalism. He thought about David's supportive management and Clara's unwavering faith. He even thought about Marcus's hostility, which was at least honest. Most of them are very nice. There's one person who's not happy I got the job, but that's okay. I don't need everyone to like me. I just need to do good work. Lily nodded sagely. Mommy used to say you can't control what other people think about you, only what you do. Your mom was a smart woman. I know, Lily said simply, and returned to her homework. That evening, as Evan looked around their apartment, half-packed boxes stacked against the walls, their few possessions organized and ready for the move, he felt a sense of completion. This chapter was ending. The chapter of survival and desperation and barely holding on. Next week, they'd move into their new place, and a new chapter would begin. One of stability and growth and building instead of just surviving. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. He opened it to find a message that made his chest tight with emotion. Evan, I read your letter. You didn't need to thank me, but I'm glad you did because it reminded me why I do this work. Why I built this company the way I did. You're going to do great things here. I can already see it. Welcome to Whitmore Solutions. Clara Evan read the message 3 times, then saved it. Someday when things got hard or he doubted himself, he'd need this reminder. This proof that someone had believed in him when he'd stopped believing in himself. Daddy? Lily appeared beside him. Can we have pizza tonight to celebrate your first week? Pizza. Real pizza from an actual restaurant, not the frozen kind they'd been rationing for months. Evan pulled out his phone and opened the delivery app he hadn't been able to use in over a year. Yeah, baby, we can have pizza, the good kind with extra cheese. As they waited for dinner to arrive, Lily chattering about her week at school, and Evan half listening while his mind processed everything that had changed, he realized something profound. A week ago, he'd been a single father failing his 18th interview, drowning in debt, weeks from eviction, watching his daughter get hurt and knowing he couldn't afford to save her. Today, he was employed, housed, hopeful, and ordering pizza without calculating whether they could afford it. The transformation wasn't complete. He still had medical bills to pay, still had to prove himself at work, still had Marcus to deal with, and a move to complete, and 1,000 other challenges ahead. But the foundation had shifted. He wasn't standing on quicksand anymore. He was standing on solid ground, and for the first time in 3 years, he could look forward instead of just bracing for the next disaster. When the pizza arrived, hot and cheesy and perfect, Evan and Lily sat at their kitchen table and ate like royalty. And somewhere across the city, in a corner office on the 34th floor, Clara Whitmore read a thank you letter and smiled, remembering the single mother she'd been 15 years ago, knowing exactly how it felt to be saved by someone who saw your worth when no one else would. The circle of compassion, once broken, had been restored. And in its restoration, 2 lives had been transformed, the one receiving mercy and the one giving it, both discovering that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is believe in someone when they've stopped believing in themselves. The moving truck arrived at 7 a.m. on Saturday, smaller than Evan had expected, but sufficient for their modest collection of belongings. He'd hired 2 college students who needed the weekend work, and together they loaded boxes and furniture with an efficiency born from necessity. Lily supervised from the sidewalk, Mr. Whiskers tucked under her arm, calling out instructions about which boxes contained fragile items. Mrs. Chen appeared around 8 with coffee and breakfast sandwiches, refusing payment as always. For the road, she said, pressing the bag into Evan's hands. You'll need your energy today. I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done for us, Evan said, and meant it. This woman had been their lifeline for 3 years, feeding them when their cupboards were bare, watching Lily when emergencies arose, never judging, always helping. You thank me by building a good life in that new place, Mrs. Chen said, her eyes bright with emotion. By being happy. That's all the thanks I need. By noon, their old apartment stood empty, its worn carpet and peeling paint exposed without their furniture to hide the flaws. Evan walked through one last time, remembering the moments they'd lived here. Lily's first day of school after Sarah died, the Christmas they'd celebrated with dollar store decorations and homemade gifts, the countless nights Evan had paced these floors wondering how he'd make it through another month. This place had sheltered them through the worst of times, and for that he was grateful. But he felt no sadness leaving it behind, only relief. The new apartment gleamed in the afternoon sun, its fresh paint and clean windows a stark contrast to what they'd left. The landlord, Mr. Patterson, met them at the door with keys and a genuine smile. "Welcome home, Mr. Brooks." "Ms. Brooks." He shook Lily's hand seriously, treating her like the young lady she was becoming. "I think you'll be very happy here." The movers unloaded quickly, and by 3 p.m. Evan was alone with Lily in their new space, surrounded by boxes but filled with possibility. The living room was twice the size of their old one. The kitchen had counter space and appliances that actually worked, and Lily's bedroom, her own bedroom, with the window seat she'd fallen in love with, was waiting to be transformed. "Can we start on my room, Daddy, please?" Evan had stopped at the hardware store that morning, picking up paint supplies with money that didn't come from desperate calculations. Purple paint, just as promised. Glow-in-the-dark stars for the ceiling. A new bedspread patterned with constellations that he'd found on sale. They spent the afternoon painting, Lily's careful strokes on the lower walls while Evan handled the higher sections. She chattered constantly about how she'd arrange her furniture, where she'd put her books, whether Mr. Whiskers preferred the window seat or the corner by the closet. "He'll probably want both," Evan said, smiling at her serious deliberation. "Cats are particular about their territory." "Mr. Whiskers isn't a cat, Daddy. He's a friend." "You're absolutely right. I apologize to Mr. Whiskers." By evening, the walls were purple and drying. The stars were adhered to the ceiling in careful constellations that Evan had looked up online, and Lily stood in the center of her new room with an expression of pure wonder. "It's perfect," she whispered. "It's exactly what Mommy would have wanted." The mention of Sarah came easier now, less like reopening a wound and more like honoring a memory. Evan pulled his daughter close, both of them smelling of paint and possibility. "She'd be so proud of you, Lily. So proud of how strong you've been. She'd be proud of you too. You didn't give up on us." That night, they ate Chinese takeout sitting on the floor of the living room, their furniture not yet assembled, boxes stacked around them like the building blocks of a new life. Evan's phone rang just as they were finishing. David Chen calling on a Saturday evening. "Evan, sorry to bother you on the weekend. I know you're moving today." "It's fine. What's up?" "We have a situation. One of our West Coast warehouses had a major system failure this afternoon. Their entire inventory tracking system crashed, and they have shipments going out Monday morning. I'm trying to coordinate the emergency response, but I could really use someone who understands the technical side of these systems." This was a test, Evan realized. Not an intentional one, perhaps, but a test nonetheless. He could beg off, claim the move as an excuse, and no one would blame him. Or he could step up, prove that Claire's faith in him was justified. "What do you need me to do?" Relief flooded David's voice. "Can you get on a call with the warehouse manager and their IT team? Help troubleshoot the problem and develop a contingency plan for Monday's shipments?" Evan looked at Lily, who was watching him with those knowing eyes. She nodded before he could even ask. "Go help them, Daddy. I'll keep unpacking." "Give me 20 minutes to get my laptop set up," Evan told David. "Send me the conference call details." The next 3 hours were intense. Evan commandeered the kitchen counter as his temporary office, joining a video call with stressed warehouse staff and frustrated IT personnel. The system failure was complex, a cascade of errors that had corrupted their database and crashed their backup servers. But as Evan listened to the technical explanations and reviewed the system architecture they shared on screen, his mind began working in ways it hadn't for 3 years. Problem-solving, strategic thinking, the ability to see patterns and solutions that others missed. These skills weren't gone. They'd just been dormant. "Okay," Evan said after absorbing all the information. "We can't fix the full system by Monday, but we don't need to. What we need is a workaround that lets you process Monday's shipments manually while IT rebuilds the database. Here's what I'm thinking." He walked them through a plan, using their paper backup logs to create a temporary tracking system, reassigning staff to manual processing, coordinating with shipping companies to adjust pickup times. It was inelegant but functional, a bridge solution that would keep operations running until the permanent fix was in place. "That could work," the warehouse manager said, hope creeping into his voice. "That could actually work." "It will work," Evan said with more confidence than he felt. "But we need to start implementing immediately. David, can you authorize the overtime for the warehouse staff? They'll need to work tomorrow to get this set up. Authorized, David said immediately. Evan, this is exactly what we needed. Thank you. After the call ended, Evan sat at his makeshift desk feeling the familiar rush of solving a complex problem under pressure. This was what he was good at. This was why Clara had hired him. Not because she felt sorry for him, but because she'd recognized capability beneath the desperation. Lily appeared beside him with a glass of water. Did you fix it? I helped develop a solution. The team will do the actual fixing. Evan took the water gratefully. Sorry that took so long, baby. It's okay. You were helping people. That's important. She paused, then added, You looked happy when you were working, like you were doing something you're good at. The observation, simple and profound, made Evan realize something he'd been too close to see. For 3 years, he'd defined himself by his struggles. Unemployed father, desperate job seeker, man failing to provide. But that wasn't who he was. Those were circumstances he'd endured, not an identity. He was Evan Brooks, supply chain coordinator, problem solver, father. And he was good at all of it. Sunday passed in a blur of unpacking and organizing. By evening, the apartment was beginning to look like a home. Furniture assembled, pictures hung, Lily's purple room complete with her name on the door in wooden letters Evan had found at a craft store. It wasn't fancy, but it was theirs, and it was stable, and that made it beautiful. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that made everything feel possible. Evan dressed in one of his new shirts, dropped Lily at school with a kiss and a promise to be home for dinner, and arrived at Whitmore Solutions ready for whatever the week would bring. The West Coast warehouse situation dominated the morning. Evan joined conference calls with IT teams, reviewed progress reports, and coordinated with David on the recovery timeline. By noon, shipments were processing smoothly using the manual workaround, and IT had a solid plan for rebuilding the database. You saved us, the warehouse manager told Evan on their final call. If those shipments had been delayed, we'd have lost major contracts. I don't know how to thank you. Just keep me in the loop on the system rebuild, Evan said, and let me know if you need any other support. After lunch, David called Evan into his office with an expression that was hard to read, serious but not angry, contemplative rather than disappointed. Close the door, David said, and Evan's stomach tightened. Had he overstepped somehow? Made a mistake in the warehouse situation? Clara wants to see you. Now. David's expression softened into something like pride. Don't look so worried. This is good news. Clara's office felt familiar now, less intimidating than it had 2 weeks ago. She gestured for Evan to sit, but this time she came around her desk to sit in the chair beside him, creating an atmosphere of collaboration rather than hierarchy. David's been keeping me updated on the warehouse situation, Clara said without preamble. What you did this weekend, dropping everything on your moving day to solve a crisis, that's exactly the kind of commitment this company needs. But more importantly, the solution you developed showed strategic thinking and deep understanding of our systems. I'm impressed, Evan. Thank you. I'm just glad I could help. It was more than help. You prevented a disaster that could have cost us hundreds of thousands in lost contracts and damaged relationships. Clara paused, and something shifted in her expression. Which brings me to why I wanted to talk to you. The West Coast distribution project I mentioned? I'm not just asking you to participate anymore. I'm asking you to lead it. Complete autonomy, significant budget, visibility at the executive level. It's a big ask for someone 2 weeks into the job, but I think you're ready. Are you interested? Evan's heart raced. This was an opportunity beyond anything he'd imagined. A chance to prove himself at the highest level, to make a real impact on the company. But it was also a risk. Failing at something this visible would end his career at Whitmore Solutions before it really began. I'm very interested, Evan said carefully. But I want to be honest with you. I'm still getting up to speed on our current systems, still building relationships with the team. Is it smart to put someone so new in charge of your biggest initiative? Clara smiled, and it reminded Evan of the smile she'd given him when she first offered him the job. The smile of someone who saw potential others missed. Evan, do you know why companies fail? Not because they lack smart people or resources or opportunities. They fail because they become risk-averse. They promote based on seniority instead of capability. They value familiarity over innovation. They choose safety over excellence. She leaned forward slightly. I didn't build this company by being safe. I built it by taking calculated risks on people who deserve chances. You're one of those people. What about Marcus? He's not going to take this well. Marcus is a good employee, but he's reached his ceiling here. He doesn't have the vision for this kind of project. You do. Claire's expression became more serious. I won't lie to you. Taking this on will make you a target. Marcus will resent it. Other people might question it. You'll be under scrutiny. But that scrutiny is an opportunity, a chance to show everyone, including yourself, what you're capable of. So I'll ask again, are you interested? Evan thought about the man who'd sat in this office 2 weeks ago, broken and desperate, certain that he'd failed his daughter and himself. That man would have been too afraid to take this risk. But that man was gone, replaced by someone who'd learned that the only way out of hell was straight through it. Yes, Evan said firmly. I'm interested. I'll do it. Good. We'll announce it at the staff meeting Wednesday. In the meantime, I want you to start developing your project plan. David will provide whatever resources you need. Clara stood, extending her hand. Welcome to the leadership team, Evan. Don't make me regret this. Her tone was light, but the meaning was clear. This was his chance. His one chance. He couldn't afford to waste it. The next 2 days were a whirlwind of preparation. Evan worked late both nights developing his project plan, researching best practices in distribution network optimization, preparing presentations that would convince stakeholders to trust his vision. He came home exhausted but energized, kissing Lily goodnight and then returning to his laptop to refine his approach. Wednesday morning arrived with the weight of expectations. The staff meeting was at 10 a.m., and Evan had been told to prepare brief remarks about the project. He'd rehearsed them a dozen times, but his hand still shook slightly as he waited for the meeting to begin. The conference room held about 30 people, managers, coordinators, senior staff. Marcus sat near the front, his expression neutral, but his body language radiating tension. He knew something was coming. Clara called the meeting to order, moving through routine business efficiently before reaching the main announcement. As many of you know, we've been planning a major overhaul of our West Coast distribution network. This is our largest capital project this year, with implications for efficiency, cost management, and customer satisfaction. She paused, letting the importance sink in. I'm pleased to announce that Evan Brooks will be leading this initiative as Senior Project Director. The room went still. A few people clapped politely. Most just stared, processing the information. Marcus's face had gone white, then red. His jaw clenched so tight, Evan could see the muscle jumping. Evan joined us 2 weeks ago, Clara continued, but he's already demonstrated the strategic thinking and problem-solving capability this project requires. As evidenced by his handling of last weekend's warehouse crisis, he has the skills and judgment to lead our most important initiative. Evan, would you like to say a few words? Evan stood, acutely aware of every eye on him. He'd prepared remarks, but suddenly they felt wrong, too formal, too defensive. Instead, he spoke from the heart. Thank you, Clara. I know some of you are wondering why someone so new to the company is being given this responsibility. That's a fair question. He looked around the room, making eye contact with as many people as possible. I can't promise I won't make mistakes. I'm still learning your systems, your culture, your ways of working, but I can promise absolute commitment to this project's success. I can promise to listen to your expertise, to value your input, to build a team that achieves something remarkable. He paused, then added, I've spent the last 3 years learning that the only way through difficult situations is with honesty, hard work, and refusal to give up. That's what I bring to this project. That's what I'll bring every single day. And I hope those of you with the experience and knowledge I lack will partner with me to make this work. Because this isn't about me proving myself, it's about all of us delivering excellence for this company. The applause that followed was warmer, more genuine. Not everyone was convinced, Marcus certainly wasn't, but Evan had earned at least a provisional chance to prove himself. After the meeting, people approached with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Sarah Lynn offered quiet congratulations and practical assistance. Ramon promised to introduce him to key vendor contacts. Keisha said simply, Don't screw this up, Brooks. A lot of us are counting on you. Marcus didn't approach at all. He left the conference room immediately, his anger visible in every stiff movement. Evan knew that confrontation was coming. He just didn't know when. It came Thursday afternoon when Evan was alone in his office reviewing distribution center proposals. Marcus appeared in his doorway without knocking, closing the door behind him with more force than necessary. "We need to talk." "Sit down," Evan said calmly, though his pulse quickened. Marcus didn't sit. He stood with his arms crossed, radiating hostility. 2 weeks. You've been here 2 weeks, and you're leading the biggest project this company has. Do you have any idea how insulting that is? To those of us who've been here for years, who've proven ourselves, who've earned advancement. I understand you're upset. Upset? Marcus's laugh was bitter. I'm furious. I've given this company 5 years of my life, 5 years of coming in early, staying late, doing whatever was asked. And what do I get? Passed over for someone Clara feels sorry for because he's a single dad with a sob story. The words hit harder than Evan expected, not because they were true, but because they echoed his own fears. Was that why Clara had hired him? Because she felt sorry for him? But then Evan remembered the warehouse crisis, remembered solving that problem not through pity, but through competence. He remembered Clara's words about capability and vision and calculated risks. You're wrong, Evan said quietly. Clara didn't hire me because she felt sorry for me. She hired me because I'm good at this work, because I have skills and experience that match what this project needs. Skills you haven't used in 3 years. Experience that's outdated. You're rusty, Brooks, and everyone knows it. Maybe I am, Evan acknowledged, but I'm also hungry. I'm motivated in ways comfortable people aren't. I know what it's like to fail, to struggle, to have everything on the line. That makes me sharp. That makes me focused. And that's what this project needs. Someone who will fight for its success like their life depends on it. Marcus's expression shifted, some of the anger draining into something more complex. Hurt, maybe, or disappointment. I deserve this, he said, and his voice had lost some of its edge. I earned it. Did you? Evan asked, not unkindly. Marcus, I've looked at your work. It's solid, competent, exactly what's expected. But this project doesn't need solid. It needs innovative. It needs someone who can think 3 steps ahead, who can see solutions that aren't obvious, who can lead people through ambiguity and uncertainty. That's not an insult to you. That's just a different skill set. So what am I supposed to do? Just accept being passed over? Keep doing solid, competent work while you get all the glory? No, Evan said firmly. You're supposed to decide what you want. If you want to be part of this project, if you want to contribute your expertise and help make it successful, I would value that enormously. Your institutional knowledge is something I genuinely need, but if you can't get past your resentment, if you're going to undermine this project because you're angry at me, then you need to say so now. Because I can't lead a team with someone actively working against its success. The ultimatum hung between them, clear and unavoidable. Marcus could be part of the solution or part of the problem, but he couldn't be both. For a long moment, Marcus said nothing. He stared at Evan, weighing something internal and invisible. Then slowly, some of the tension left his shoulders. What would my role be? On the project team? The question was an olive branch, tentative but genuine. Evan grabbed it carefully. Senior Operations Analyst. You'd be responsible for evaluating current distribution center performance, identifying efficiency gaps, and developing improvement metrics. It's critical work that requires deep system knowledge, exactly what you have. And I'd report to you. Yes, but I'd rely on you. There's a difference between hierarchy and value, Marcus. One is organizational necessity. The other is genuine respect for what you bring. Marcus considered this, then nodded slowly. Okay, I'll do it. But Brooks, don't make me regret giving you a chance. The irony of the statement, Marcus giving Evan a chance when it was really the opposite, wasn't lost on either of them. But they both let it stand, a small fiction that preserved Marcus's dignity while opening the door to collaboration. After Marcus left, Evan sat in his office feeling the weight of what had just happened. He'd navigated a confrontation that could have destroyed the project before it started, and he'd done it with honesty and respect rather than authority and intimidation. That mattered, not just for the project, but for the kind of leader he wanted to be. His phone buzzed with a text from Clara. David told me about your conversation with Marcus. Well handled. This is why I hired you. The words settled something in Evan's chest that had been unsettled since the staff meeting. She didn't hire him out of pity. She hired him because she recognized something in him that he was only now beginning to see clearly in himself. The following weeks passed in a blur of productivity and progress. Evan threw himself into the distribution project with the kind of focused intensity that came from knowing this was his one chance to prove himself. He assembled his team, Marcus included, and began the complex work of analyzing current operations, modeling improvements, and developing implementation strategies. The work was challenging but invigorating. Evan's team responded to his leadership style, which emphasized collaboration over command, questions over directives. Even Marcus, initially resistant, began contributing valuable insights as he realized Evan genuinely valued his expertise. "I have to admit," Marcus said one afternoon during a team meeting, "this approach is working better than I expected. The data analysis you suggested revealed inefficiencies I'd been looking at for years without seeing." It was the closest thing to an apology Evan would get, and he accepted it gracefully. At home, life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Lily thrived in their new apartment, her purple room a sanctuary where she did homework and read books and dreamed about the future. The stitches had come out of her forehead, leaving a small scar that she'd decided made her look brave rather than damaged. "Like Mommy said," she told Evan, "scars are proof we keep going." Evan's relationship with his daughter had shifted too, becoming less about survival and more about growth. He could afford to take her to movies now, to buy her books without calculating whether they could skip another meal, to say yes to school activities without mentally reviewing the bank balance first. One evening in late October, 3 months after he'd started at Whitmore Solutions, Evan received a call from Dr. Patterson, Lily's pediatrician. The hospital had processed his financial assistance application, the one he'd filled out but hadn't pursued after getting the job. "Mr. Brooks, I have good news. Your application was approved. The hospital is writing off the remaining balance on Lily's emergency room visit. You don't owe anything more." Evan had to ask him to repeat it. He'd been faithfully making his $400 monthly payments, had resigned himself to a year of them. But the hospital's financial assistance program, combined with his payment history, had qualified him for complete forgiveness of the remaining balance. Thank you. Thank you so much." After he hung up, Evan sat on the couch in their living room and cried. Not from sadness or despair, but from overwhelming relief and gratitude. Every burden he'd been carrying for 3 years had been lifted. The eviction threat, gone. The medical debt, forgiven. The unemployment, transformed into meaningful work. The fear that he couldn't provide for his daughter, replaced with proof that he could and would. Lily found him there, tears streaming down his face, and immediately grew concerned. "Daddy, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, baby." Evan pulled her into his lap, holding her close. "Everything's right. For the first time in so long, everything's finally right." In November, Evan presented his distribution project plan to the executive team. He'd spent weeks preparing, refining every detail, anticipating every question. Clara sat at the head of the conference table, her expression neutral, but her eyes sharp, evaluating. Evan walked them through his analysis, current inefficiencies costing the company millions annually, proposed improvements that would reduce delivery times by 30% while cutting costs by 20%, implementation timeline spanning 18 months with clear milestones. The questions came hard and fast. Financial projections, risk mitigation, personnel requirements, technology investments. Evan answered each one with confidence backed by thorough research and Marcus's institutional knowledge. When the presentation ended, the room fell silent. Evan stood at the front, his heart pounding, waiting for the verdict. Clara spoke first. "This is excellent work, Evan. Thorough, strategic, and ambitious without being reckless. You have my full support to move forward." The other executives nodded their agreement, and Evan felt something release in his chest, tension he'd been holding for months, maybe years. He'd done it. He'd proven that Clara's faith in him was justified. After the meeting, Clara pulled him aside. "You know what impressed me most about that presentation? Not the data, though it was excellent. Not the strategy, though it's sound. What impressed me was your confidence. 3 months ago, you walked into my office convinced you were going to fail. Today, you stood in front of the executive team and commanded the room. That transformation is remarkable. You gave me the opportunity to transform, Evan said simply. You saw something in me I couldn't see in myself. I saw what was always there. You just needed the circumstances to reveal it. Clara smiled. Evan, I want to talk to you about something. The project director role was always intended to be temporary, a way to test your capabilities. Based on what I've seen, I'd like to make it permanent and add it to your official title. It comes with a salary increase and a seat in senior leadership meetings. Interested? Evan didn't have to think about it. Yes. Absolutely yes. Good. HR will draw up the paperwork. Congratulations, Evan. You've earned this. That evening, Evan took Lily out to dinner at a real restaurant, the kind with tablecloths and a children's menu and prices he'd once thought were obscene but could now afford without anxiety. They ordered whatever they wanted, no calculations, no compromises. Daddy, Lily said over dessert, are we rich now? The question made Evan laugh. No, baby, we're not rich. But we're stable. We're secure. We don't have to worry about keeping the lights on or having enough food. That's not the same as being rich, but it's pretty wonderful. I think it's better than rich, Lily said seriously, because you're not scared anymore. I can tell. You used to be scared all the time, even when you tried to hide it, but you're not now. The observation, delivered with a child's brutal honesty, made Evan realize how much she'd been carrying too. Not just her own fears, but the weight of his, and how much lighter they both were now that the fear had been replaced with security. You're right, Evan admitted. I'm not scared anymore. And you know why? Because I learned something important. I learned that even when everything falls apart, even when you think you can't go on, sometimes someone shows up who believes in you. And that belief can change everything. Like Ms. Whitmore believed in you. Exactly like that. Do you think Mommy sent her to help us? Evan paused, considering the question carefully. He'd never been particularly religious, even less so after Sarah died. But there was something about the timing of it all. Clara running after him, seeing him at his lowest moment, choosing to help when she could have easily let him walk away. I don't know if Mommy sent her, Evan said slowly. But I think Mommy would be happy that Ms. Whitmore was there when we needed her most. And I think she'd tell us to pay that kindness forward someday, to be the person who helps someone else when they need it. Then that's what we'll do, Lily said with the simple certainty of childhood. When we can help someone, we will. Christmas that year was different from any they'd had since Sarah died. Evan could afford a real tree, real presents, a real holiday dinner. But more than the material things, there was joy, laughter, hope for the future instead of just survival in the present. On Christmas morning, Lily opened gifts with the enthusiasm of a child who'd learned not to expect much and was delighted to be wrong. Books and art supplies and a new winter coat she actually needed. And tucked at the back of the tree, one more box wrapped in silver paper. What's this? Lily asked, carefully pulling away the wrapping. Inside was a framed photograph, the one from Evan's briefcase, Sarah and Lily, at the beach, both laughing. But Evan had done something new with it. He'd had it professionally restored and enlarged, the colors brightened, the image clarified, and added a small engraved plaque at the bottom. Always with us. Always loved. Lily stared at the photograph for a long moment, then looked up at her father with tears in her eyes. Can we put it in the living room so Mommy can see everything we're doing? I think that's perfect, Evan said, his own voice thick. They hung it on the wall that afternoon, right where they'd both see it every day. A reminder of what they'd lost, but also of what they still had, each other, and the love that Sarah had given them both, still carrying them forward even in her absence. In January, Whitmore Solutions held its annual company celebration, a formal dinner where Clara recognized outstanding employees and announced company achievements. Evan attended in a new suit he'd bought specifically for the occasion, feeling like an imposter among executives and senior leaders who'd been with the company for decades. But when Clara stood to deliver her remarks, she looked directly at Evan as she spoke about the company's values. This year, we've been reminded that talent comes in unexpected forms, Clara said, that the resume doesn't always tell the full story, that sometimes the best employees are the ones who've faced adversity and emerged stronger, hungrier, more determined to succeed. She paused. Evan Brooks joined us 6 months ago with a gap in his employment history and circumstances that would have made many companies hesitate. But he had something more important than an unbroken career trajectory. He had character, capability, and the kind of resilience that can't be taught. Clara outlined the distribution project's early successes, the cost savings already being realized, the improvements in efficiency. Then she added, "This is what happens when we choose to see potential instead of just pedigree, when we believe in people instead of just credentials." "Evan, would you stand, please?" Evan rose, feeling the eyes of the entire company on him, his face burning with a mixture of pride and embarrassment. "Thank you for proving that my faith in you was well placed," Clara said. "And thank you for reminding all of us why we do this work, not just to build a successful company, but to create opportunities that transform lives." The applause that followed was genuine and warm, and as Evan sat down, he caught Marcus's eye across the room. Marcus nodded once, a gesture of acknowledgement, if not quite friendship. It was enough. After the dinner, Clara found Evan in the crowd. "Walk with me," she said, and they stepped out onto the building's rooftop terrace, the city spread out below them in a glittering carpet of lights. "Do you remember what you wrote in that thank you letter?" Clara asked. "You said you didn't know what you'd done to deserve the chance I gave you." "I remember. I want you to understand something, Evan. You didn't have to deserve it. That's not how compassion works. I didn't give you a chance because you earned it through past achievements. I gave you a chance because I saw someone drowning who deserved a life raft, and I happened to have one available." She turned to face him fully. "But what you did with that chance, that you earned entirely on your own, the success you've had, the leader you've become, the way you've transformed your life, that's all you, Evan, not me. I couldn't have done it without you. Maybe not. But I couldn't have built the company I wanted without people like you. People who understand that success isn't just about profit margins and quarterly reports. It's about lives changed, potential realized, human dignity restored." Clara smiled. "You've given me something too, you know. You've reminded me why I started this company, why I ran after you that day instead of letting you walk away. Sometimes we all need that reminder." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Two people who understood that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the chance to prove themselves. "What's next for you?" Clara asked. "What do you want from your career now?" Evan thought about it. 6 months ago, all he'd wanted was survival. A paycheck, stability, the ability to keep his daughter fed and sheltered. But now, with those basic needs secured, he could think bigger. "I want to build something meaningful," he said slowly. "I want to lead teams that do excellent work. I want to make decisions that matter. And someday, when I'm in a position to do it, I want to be the person who gives someone else the chance you gave me." "Then that's exactly what you'll do," Clara said with certainty. "Because that's who you are, Evan. Not the desperate man who walked out of an interview 6 months ago. Not the single father barely holding things together. You're a leader, a problem solver, someone who understands that the measure of success isn't what you achieve, but what you enable others to achieve." She was quoting the plaque in her office, Evan realized, the philosophy she'd built her company on. And now he understood it wasn't just corporate messaging. It was lived truth, embodied in the way she led, in the chances she took on people, in the culture she'd created. "Thank you," Evan said, and this time the words carried the weight of everything, for the job, for the faith, for running after him when everyone else had let him walk away, for seeing his worth when he'd stopped seeing it himself. "You're welcome, Serprasim," Clara said simply. "Now go home to your daughter. Tell her about tonight. Let her see that the future you're building is because of her, not despite her. She needs to know that." Evan did exactly that. He went home to the apartment with purple walls and glow-in-the-dark stars, to the little girl who still slept with Mr. Whiskers, who had a scar on her forehead that proved she kept going even when things were hard. He told her about the speech, about Clara's words, about the company celebrating not just his success, but the philosophy behind it. That people deserve chances, that circumstances didn't define capability, that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was believe in someone when they'd stopped believing in themselves. "I'm proud of you, Daddy," Lily said sleepily, already drifting off in her bed. "I'm proud of you too, baby. You kept believing in me even when I couldn't believe in myself. That's what saved us. Your faith. After she fell asleep, Evan stood in his daughter's doorway, watching the glow-in-the-dark stars on her ceiling create their own small universe. He thought about the man he'd been 6 months ago, broken, desperate, certain he was failing at everything that mattered. That man seemed like a stranger now, someone Evan had known but left behind, like an old photograph that captured who you used to be but not who you'd become. The journey from desperation to dignity hadn't been instant or easy. It had required Clara's compassion, yes, but also Evan's willingness to accept help, to prove himself, to work harder than he'd ever worked, to transform opportunity into achievement. Both elements were necessary: the helping hand and the will to grab it. The faith someone showed in you and the determination to prove that faith was justified. Outside his window, the city glowed with possibility. Somewhere out there were other single parents drowning in circumstances beyond their control, other talented people who'd lost their way, other Evan Brooks waiting for someone to see past their resume to their potential. And someday, when he was in a position to do it, Evan would be that someone. He'd be Clara Whitmore running down a hallway, choosing to help instead of letting someone walk away. He'd be the person who remembered what it felt like to be desperate and used that memory to fuel compassion instead of judgment. That was the real gift Clara had given him, not just a job, but a philosophy. Not just opportunity, but purpose. The understanding that success wasn't measured by what you accumulated, but by what you gave back, by the lives you touched, by the chances you gave to people who deserved them. Evan looked at the photograph of Sarah and Lily on his living room wall, at his wife's laughing face frozen in a moment of pure joy. He thought about how proud she'd be of the father he'd become, of the life he'd built for their daughter, of the man he'd proven himself to be when everything was stripped away except character and determination. "We made it," he whispered to Sarah's image. "We're going to be okay. Better than okay. We're going to thrive." And in that moment, standing in his modest apartment with his sleeping daughter safe in her purple room, Evan Brooks felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Not just hope, not just relief, but deep, abiding peace. The kind that comes from knowing you've walked through fire and emerged not just intact, but transformed. The kind that comes from being seen, valued, and given the chance to prove what you're capable of. The kind that comes from understanding that sometimes the worst day of your life can become the doorway to the best chapter you've ever known. All because someone cared enough to run after you when you walked away. All because compassion, when given freely and received gratefully, has the power to change everything.